We're on kind of a short leash here in terms of our time that's available, so we're going to go ahead and get started. It is a pleasure to have an event like this where it's a party rather than launching right into the business of trying to make things go for everybody in the community. So I welcome you all here this evening. Up front, you will notice a little bit of musical chairs going on. I decreed that we were going to have council members sit where they want for the this meeting and the next meeting. So there's a little bit of jostling as people figure out where to sit for a change. So Mike dedicated to staying on the right. So all right, with that, we'll go ahead and launch it. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. It'll be sort of a mishmash. We'll forget some things, catch them later. But with that, Kirsten Taylor, you're up.
Council members and members of the community. I'm Kirsten Taylor, Administrative Services Manager and City Ombudsman. So the Mercer Island Green Power Challenge had a theme, Mercer Island gets green one hero at a time. Some significant steps that happened in 2012. First, the Green Ribbon Commission made the Green Power Challenge its 2012 focus, and then the council adopted a green power resolution and purchased green energy in April of last year. The campaign kicked off at Island Vision's Leap for Green event, and finally, at the end of this year, the city has been designated an EPA Green Power Community. So some key partners, of course, the city and PSC are the official partners for the Green Power Challenge, but also significantly the Green Ribbon Commission, Island Vision, TIMI, and very importantly, the Mercer Island School District and the PTSAs and green teams from the schools. The challenge would not have been successful without the efforts and involvement of the school district. So we had some great marketing thanks to Leslie Myers of 3 Degrees. We put together some posters to really advertise the community, the program out in the community. So one of our early green heroes was Cora, and her posters were put up around the community at schools, just everywhere we could put them up. We also had our Green Hero principles. These were the principles from last year. You'll notice that there's at least one change for this year. And again, we really wanted to focus on the schools because that was a significant part of, we knew that would be a significant part of the challenge. And then, of course, we had our Green Hero Council member, thank you, Jane Blom, for so graciously being willing to be the face of one of the Green Heroes for the community. We had signs at Mercerdale Park, banners at the schools, lots of information up out in the community. 3 Degrees also did outreach tabling events, and 3 Degrees is the subconsultant with PSC. They do the outreach, and they were at Leap for Green, Summer Celebration, the Farmers Market a couple of times. They went to the Mercer Island Chamber Luncheon and the Rotary Club Luncheon. They were at the library multiple times, doorbelling, National Night Out, PTSA events. They took advantage of walk-to-school events, and they did meetings with the Mercer Island businesses. So then we have, moving to the Mercer Island businesses, we had another significant face in the community, and I think the first green business to sign up once the campaign had started in 2012, and that was Island Books with Roger Page. And Roger isn't able to be here tonight, but Nancy Page is, so we appreciate that. And I think Heather's going to talk a little more about Island Books and how they were supportive of the challenge. So other green businesses, we really do want to emphasize how much we appreciate the businesses that signed up for Green Power. The Mercer Island Chamber of Commerce, Island Books, Studio 904, Stopsky's Deli, Hair Excel, Six Walls, and the JCC also signed up for Green Power. So the Green Power Challenge started with our goal of, we had less than 500 signed up in the community, and the goal was to get 650 participants by the end of the year to earn a $25,000 grant from PSC. Mid-year, we hit that mark, so they gave us a stretch goal and said they would add $5,000 if we could sign up 750 for the Green Power Challenge. And we did it. Challenge was met, and I think it was the last days of the year that the last few people signed up. So the city did earn a $30,000 grant to fund a solar project at the community center. And also, very importantly, there were incentives to the schools so that if people designated our schools, they could earn a $10 per sign-up incentive for each school. So there's over $2,000 in grants to the PTSAs. So next steps, we're going to celebrate the community success because this truly was a community effort. We will be installing a solar array at the community center this year, and we do want to continue to encourage people to sign up for green power. We hit a 10% sign-up rate, barely, by the skin of our teeth, but it doesn't really compare to some other communities that we would like to be better than. So we don't want to say we're done.
Not that we're competitive.
Yeah. And my understanding is incentives are still available for nonprofit groups and the PTSAs. If they would like to still help to encourage their membership to sign up for green power, they can earn incentives. They just need to have an agreement with PSC, which they are very happy to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Bassett for his next round of comments on the program.
Thank you. Thanks. Great presentation. So I get to do acknowledgments and welcomes of folks, and this is a moment where if you don't get to stand up, something went wrong, because pretty much everybody in the room at some point or the other should stand up during this. So if you get to the end and you haven't stood up, just stand up. So my fellow council members, most of whom signed up for Green Power this year, thank you very much for doing that, or we're already customers. PSE staff, and if you guys could stand up just for a moment. Heather Mulligan, who was a key participant in this whole thing, Jason Van Ort, and James, thank you, yes, new person here, and Will Chin back there, who we'll be talking more about in a few minutes, because he's going to be the future of working with us on this kind of stuff. Leslie Myers. So Leslie, all the artwork you saw, those concepts, she's the one who did that, and she, more than anything, kept the rest of us from just spending the entire year thinking up ideas and then doing nothing with it. So at the end of the day, she was a star in just getting us organized and actually getting it done. So Leslie, thank you very much. GRC members and associated folks, Island Vision, Timmy, the organizations that got involved and made this happen. If you're involved in one of those, please stand up. Thank you all. School district, I don't see Gary or Janet, but they said they were going to come, and so we'll... Kim's pointing at folks, so... You teach? Excellent. Who are you?
I'm Jamie Cook. I'm the advisor for the green team at the high school.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Especially the high school. So, and so businesses in attendance that signed up for Green Power. I know Island Books. Yes, you're here. Welcome. Yeah, and thank you. Anybody? Okay. Thank you. And in the back?
The JCC.
Thank you. Let's see. We also have, sort of a side note, Linda Danforth, Senior Advisor to Adam Smith. And Linda, if you could just stand up so people know who you are. So Adam Smith's our... She didn't know it, but show that Adam Smith's keen about environmental issues. And... parents who signed up for Green Power or some other way were involved, if you could stand up or wave your hand, I'd love to see you express that you were involved. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, what a great group. Okay, who did I not recognize? Terry, I see you at PTAs. Yes, PTAs were involved. Thank you very much. Who's here from a PTA? Bunch of folks. Excellent. Thank you. All right, now who am I forgetting? All right, we're going to call it good at that point. And at this point, so one of the things that happened over... Oh, well, yes.
That goes without saying.
It goes without saying. We have staff here as well. So I said everybody should stand up. So we do have staff. You guys want to just wave to everybody and say we're staff? Because a lot of folks who are here for the first time don't know what goes on at a council meeting. So, all right. So one of the things that happened over the course of the year, as Kirsten said, is that we reached a milestone with regards to the EPA. And so I want to welcome up now Kate Kelly, who's going to say brief remarks, I understand, to the podium here about our accomplishments with regards to the EPA. Welcome. We'll challenge you to, look both ways at once.
It feels a little disrespectful. Well, I'm so privileged to be able to be here with your community tonight to celebrate this important milestone in just setting the trend for hopefully what is the future of our whole country. But it's very significant that that the community has taken this on and achieved what they've achieved. The city of Mercer Island did become a green power community, and this is a program that EPA has nationally. We have partnerships with businesses and communities. Community includes towns, villages, counties, even Indian tribes and reservations across the country. And there's hurdles that have to be reached in order to meet the EPA requirements to be in the program, which Mercer Island has done, and then some. So Mercer Island is the 36th community in the country to achieve this recognition, joining the ranks of Portland, Palo Alto, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., among others. Within Washington, it's the third community after Bellingham and Lacey. So you're in good company there.
So we beat Bainbridge Island.
You did. I'll get on that when I get home.
We're happy to have them follow us.
Okay. So anyway, this has just been a reason for the community to get engaged, as we saw in green power, and have individual households make individual decisions, and businesses as well, about investing in what is an important transformation in our businesses in the way we use power in our country. With the changes that have been made in Mercer Island, you can boast, and PSC can probably talk to this just as well, but 6 million kilowatt hours of green power are being used annually, which is equivalent to avoiding the carbon dioxide emissions of nearly 900 passenger vehicles per year, or the carbon emissions from the equivalent of more than 500 average American homes. This is a very big deal. It sets the trend and the example that we all need to follow, including other communities. And so I congratulate you on this important recognition. And we have a sign. We have 2 signs, but we're only...
Oh, photo op.
We're not going to try to do with both of them. But anyway, so these signs can be posted around town to remind people of this important achievement. Okay.
I'm sure I blinked every time.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Kate, forgive me, I didn't give your title as you started, but you're the Director of EPA Region 10, Office of Air, Waste, and Toxics, if my paperwork here is correct? I am. It's a lofty title. Thank you. Thank you. All right, next up, Heather Mulligan. Come on up. So, Heather, well, I'll let you introduce yourself since you'll do a better job of it than I will. But okay. Heather was absolutely instrumental in this and is the marketing manager for the whole Green Power program for PSE, if I have that correct?
I am the market manager for PSE's Green Power program, and I have, this was the 5th community challenge that I've worked on at PSE, and I think it was probably the most fun, and not just because I'm standing here in front of you all tonight, but this has been a fabulous community to work with. I've thoroughly enjoyed the whole process, and I commend you all on the effort that everybody put forth. This challenge was a true success, and on behalf of PSE, I want to express our gratitude to all of the people and the organizations that contributed along the way, either by signing up or helping to spread the word. Both were truly important. And tonight we're definitely here celebrating your success. There were many people, as I said, and organizations that contributed along the way. And so we wanted to just kind of give a little token to everybody to remember the challenge by who participated. So first off, Mayor Bassett. I will make you dinner. You're going to do that a couple times. Thank you.
Thank you. Signed by Andy Wappler, no less.
Yes, who was very sorry he couldn't be here tonight. We want to thank you because you, I think, were at nearly every meeting we held and contributing along the way and very involved. And that was a unique situation for us, but wonderful. And your support meant a lot. So thank you. Kirsten Taylor, thank you so much. You, too, were at every meeting and truly instrumental in making sure that things happened. So thank you. Elliot Newman is not here this evening.
Nope, the story is that his wife said, well, we have a date tonight, and he said, I'm going to stick with that. So.
I think that was probably a smart decision. Yes. But Elliot Newman was fabulous, too. Again, another member of the committee who gave a lot throughout the challenge. Terry Mormon. Thank you very much for representing the chamber and getting us in with businesses and the community to talk and represent what we were doing. So thank you. The Mercer Island School District. And I know you said somebody was going to be here, unfortunately.
Yeah, Gary didn't come, I think. But what was your name? Sure. Jamie, thank you. I'll forget that 2 more times, I'm afraid.
Well, Jamie, you may not want to go too far. In a little while.
I'll make sure.
Thank you. The Transition Initiative Mercer Island, or TIMI. The organization was a participant at the table in our planning meetings and in getting the word out. And again, thank you very much. And of course, the city of Mercer Island itself has, besides the individual members. So,
Thank you. They did all the work.
the Green Ribbon Commission, and I think there's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of wanting to make sure that each organization was mentioned and for what they contributed.
Yeah, send Nancy Lee up for that one.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. Island Vision. Thank you. Kirsten mentioned Island Books earlier and Roger Page, and Roger was gracious enough not only to pose for some of our pictures and posters, but to allow us in the crucial final hours of the challenge to table in front of his store, and may very well have been responsible for bringing in the final enrollment that helped us reach that 750. So we definitely want to acknowledge Roger.
Yeah, and Nancy's here, is that right? Oh, she did,
Okay.
okay.
So if you see Roger, stop in his business and say thank you.
Yeah.
And somebody else who wasn't here, but I want to acknowledge, was Jonathan Harrington, who was also a truly dedicated member of our committee. And I'm sorry that he couldn't be here tonight to celebrate with us, because he was here so far along the way. The Jewish Community Center, for being a participant, and I know we're going to continue a partnershp with the JCC in the coming months, so I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you. And then I wanted to acknowledge more publicly those businesses that are real environmental leaders in the community. And for a business to be acknowledged in the program, they've made a real commitment to green power, kind of be above what a normal residential customer is doing. They've had to make a financial commitment to this program, and that, you know, can be tough for a business to weigh, given especially the economy these days. But there were a number of businesses who did step up and made a commitment to this program. And so I wanted to acknowledge Hair Excel, Island Books, the Mercer Island Chamber of Commerce, Six Walls, Stopsky's Deli, the JCC, Studio 904, and I saw your...
Kay is here.
Yes. Thank you very much. And we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of these. So now the really fun part, and I know the part that everybody's truly been waiting for, the check presentations. So, Jason.
The certificates are all well and good.
I know, but they don't come with money.
Yes.
I get that. So Jason's going to help me hand out the checks. Actually, Jason's going to hand out the checks.
610 Vanna White.
So we'll start with Emmanuel Episcopal Church. Do we have somebody? We may not have anybody. Okay, well then. They'll get their money anyway. They earn $50. Island Vision.
Ellen, does this say something about...
You get to hold this in.
Yeah.
We've got to go in the patch.
Do we have anybody here from Crest Learning Center? Well then,
Jason does that well. He's got the... Jason, you've got the pro smile. You're...
how about Island Park Elementary?
Thank you so much.
Come on up.
Really, thank you.
Wait, we got one more.
Oh, yeah,
Come
of
on.
course. Here, let's move over to make sure we get everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Islander Middle School. Yes. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Pardon me? A little too old, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lake Ridge Elementary.
$360.
Wow. And the only stipulation is you got to spend it on green programs at your schools. So...
You want to hold that? Yeah, hold one on the top. Oh, my heck. Here you go. You can take that with you.
West Mercer Elementary.
West Mercer, by the way, had a great showing.
Very good.
I think although the high school had more total signups, the number of signups per student was the highest at West Mercer. So West Mercer is really a winner here.
Good showing. Very
Yeah,
nice.
nice job, guys.
Thank you.
Mercer Island High School, $900.
So Mercer Island High School was the winner of the overall school challenge. Did a fabulous job, and we thank you all.
Oh, is that green power powered?
It's our green team t-shirts.
Solar. Perfect. Thank you. Congratulations.
So, thank you to all the schools and the organizations who helped to bring in more enrollments for the challenge, and again, help us to reach that $750 goal. And we would love to work with all of those organizations again in the future if that's something you're interested in doing. So it's just a matter of letting us know. And last but not least, probably the
Oh, there's one more.
Oh,
just a little one, just a little one. So
That would be
I assume so.
on behalf of the PSC Green Power Program,
the big check.
This is the what's the Publishers Clearinghouse.
Okay, it might not be quite
You
that.
didn't put my name on it though.
The whole council to also.
Yeah, come on up, council members. Come on up, council members. Why not? Hey, Mr. City Man, why don't you join us?
I guess I probably have to spend it.
Exactly.
How does that spot well?
Excellent. All right, thank you. Now, do you take that to the regular check? To the counter? Can you use the drive-through and, you know?
The ATM is
Yeah.
what's great.
Heather, you all set? Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're actually right on time, which is kind of amazing. Let's see. I have just a couple of more. Well, I guess I get to throw it open to council members if anybody wants to have a speech right now. This is your moment. And if you don't, that's fine too.
I don't really have a speech. I think I'm really happy that we beat out Bainbridge, and we're the third city in the state to do this. I think it's wonderful, and we have a long heritage of being environmentally conscious and having a real active citizenry get involved, and this is testimony to that tradition. Congratulations to us.
Okay.
I'd say congratulations, and I hope this is only the beginning.
Mike, anything? Nope. Pass. Okay. A couple more things. Let's see. One special recognition moment. Kirsten Taylor, step up, please. Kirsten, without Kirsten, nothing would have happened this year. She was spectacular. And so for you, a card and a gift. And thank you very much. You were spectacular. A couple more notes. So this coming year, we're shifting our focus from the Green Power Challenge, although you're still more than welcome to sign up for that, and that should be a message if you haven't signed up. you're more than welcome to still sign up. But we are shifting our focus to home energy audits this year, and I would like to just have Will Chin stand up for a moment more. He's got literature. He will be out in the lobby. He will be our main point of contact. Will is the Efficiency Outreach Manager for PSE, and I think the short story is that PSE will pay the cost such that you get $100 worth of having somebody come to your home and change out light bulbs and tell you what other things you can do to save money at home on your energy bills for free. So
We have a great slate of various rebates and free home energy audits. We have materials. As an incentive, grab materials, I put them outside near the cake. But I look forward to carrying the momentum that we have through 2030.
So thank you, and we'll be working with you this coming year. And finally, we have now this really large check, which we're going to turn into a solar array. And Susan Madison, you're here. So Susan's been working hard with the community on trying to figure out how to not just have the array that PSE has supplied the funds for, but to jumpstart that into something even larger with community donations. And she's done all sorts of work in terms of figuring out how to get that done. Susan, did you want to say a couple words? Or we actually didn't talk about this in advance. So if you're game, you can say a couple words, and if you're not, you can talk to folks out over the cake. But it's your come on up.
Only because we're talking about Bainbridge Island. So I just wanted to make a challenge to the community. The beautiful check that we have here will fund a small solar array, maybe 15, 17 solar modules, and we're looking for donations to grow that to make it up to a 10 kilowatt array instead of a 3.2 kilowatt array. That would be maybe 50 modules. But Bainbridge Island just installed a 70 plus kilowatt community solar array. And that is 7 times what we're asking. So we need donations to really make this a great community solar project. And we'll start taking checks tonight, either for Kirsten or through Island Vision, earmarked for this community solar array, because this is a way for us to get our first Mercer Island renewable energy asset, which would be a great thing. So we'll show you some solar modules out there.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
And the pitch I will add to that is that your donation, of course, goes towards the city's solar array, which offsets our costs of having electricity at the community center. It also goes towards a production credit that the state offers, and that therefore puts money back into the city's pocket to pay for, and that'll be earmarked for green projects within the city. So it essentially is a donation that gives twice in that respect. So with that, I have brought my checkbook tonight, and I will be writing a check to the group that's doing this, and I would encourage others to get involved as well. Find the paperwork that Susan will have outside, and have a look at that, figure out more about it. With that, unless I have forgotten something, somebody tell me if I have, I think we're at cake time. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, PSE, and everybody else. And let's go have some cake, and that's it. Thank you.
Council, you have dinner in the caucus room for you.
Cue video.
Meeting will come to order, please. Allie, could you call roll?
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin. Councilmember Jane Brom. Councilmember Mike Sarro.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady. Councilmember Tana Sen. Deputy Mayor Dan Grouse. Mayor Bruce Bassett.
Here. Thank you. We begin this evening with an award, and for that, Bruce Fletcher, could you please step up?
Parks and Recreation. At the recent Washington Recreation and Park Association conference, Mercer Island's own Jana Rash was honored as the Outstanding Professional for the statewide Facility Services section of 2012. Jana is well respected for her knowledge in community center management and is called upon for advice and leadership by countless other city parks and recreation departments. Jana has served on the board of directors for WRPA and is currently assisting the incoming association president on their strategic planning update. With the excellent quality of work that Jana performs for the City of Mercer Island, it's easy to see why WRPA chose Jana for this award. We are very proud of Jana's accomplishments. Congratulations, Jana, and Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Bruce. I have the pleasure of reading the plaque that Jana is to receive. The plaque says, Washington Recreation and Park Association Outstanding Professional Award, presented this 9th day of November, 2012, not tonight apparently, to Jana Rash, in acknowledgement of her continued dedication to her customers, community, profession, and the facility services section. Thank you very much. Come on up.
Thank you.
Did you want to say a few words? Great, Jana.
You have 3 minutes.
Or I'm calling Ed.
Do I need to say for the record, Jana Rash? All I have to say is, you know, it's WRPA is a really important. It's a really important organization to the state and to the city, and it's just really nice that the city council will support us in being involved in it, because there are a lot of great people and we get a lot of efficiencies from it. As much as we give back, we get far more from that involvement and those other professionals. So thank you.
Thank you for all you do. Okay, before we move to appearances, I have a couple of things to say. First is we've had a great early session Green Power celebration this evening, so for those who weren't here, you missed some fun. If there's still cake outside, you are welcome to go and have a piece. So after appearances, if you want to go out and have a bite of that, you can. There's another reason for having cake this evening as well. It is the city manager's birthday today. So, I, thankfully for all of you, will not. But happy birthday, Rich. So, okay. With that, we move to appearances, a moment where you may speak on any issue of interest to you. You have 3 minutes. Please begin by stating your name and address. I will gently cut you off at the 3-minute mark, and I think that's it. Oh, and sir, you go ahead, Marty, and the gentleman behind you there wanted to speak as well. So if you want to go ahead and start us off, that'd be great. And feel free to bend the heck out of that microphone to. Okay.
I can stand up for about 3 minutes.
All right.
I think.
Welcome.
Thank you very kindly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Carl Dodrill. My address is 2956 72nd Avenue Southeast, and I am here to bring you information on the likely effects of tolling, I-90 tolling, on the faith community of Mercer Island. To assist in estimating the effects of an I-90 toll upon our faith community, all churches on the island were contacted, and each was asked to provide the percentage of their congregation which live off the island. 9 congregations provided usable estimates of off-islanders, and they are listed on your sheets that each of you have. Results showed that from 16 to 68% of Mercer Island congregations consist of off-island people. The average was 39% and the median was 40%. Notable is the fact that the two largest congregations, the Conservative congregation and St. Monica, serve approximately 2,244 families, of which 56% come from off the island. The smaller congregations have fewer off-island congregants. Considered together, the percentage of total worshipers which are off-island appears to be in the range of 45 to 50%. What is the implication of these findings? Well, if a third of the off-islanders stopped coming to houses of worship on Mercer Island with the initiation of tolling, just as the traffic on 520 diminished about one-third when tolling started there, the congregations could decrease by an average of about 15%. Similar budgetary losses would certainly lead to the cutting of services and to a loss of staff. Parochial schools would be hit especially hard. Further, volunteerism within the churches would decrease, and the off-island charitable outreach work often done by retired and limited income people might nearly collapse. As you know, municipal governments do not have the resources to replace what the faith community provides. In conclusion, the adverse effects of tolling upon the faith community of Mercer Island would be far-reaching. Notably diminished attendance, services, staff, outreach, and charitable work must be expected with tolling. Sadly, church budgets are already so tight on the island that diminished funds could threaten the very existence of some of our houses of worship. I therefore ask you to please do not support I-90 tolling. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you. All right, Marty.
Been a while here. Good evening. My name is Marty Gale. I live at 9404 Southeast 54th Street. On January 17th, the Mercer Island Patch posted an article entitled, quote, WSDOT surveying drivers on I-90 tolls. This may have been the first time some of the community here realized tolling might be coming to the Lifeline Bridge that Mercer Islanders use. The article stated, quote, the Washington Department of Transportation, WSDOT, mailed a 28-question survey to some of the 10,000 bridge drivers last Friday. That would be January 11th. I have 3 questions about the survey. For my first question, did any of you receive a copy of the survey at the time WSDOT sent it out, or did all of you? That would be around January 11th. If not, have you received a copy since? If so, who provided the copy, WSDOT or the City Hall? If you still haven't received a copy, I brought a copy for each of you this evening. One question on the survey asked, did you have a choice of routes the last time you used the I-90 bridge? I think we can assume they are talking about a trip within the last year, since tolling started on 520 over a year ago. Now I ask you, what choice would Mercer Islanders have? Obviously, to go west, we use the I-90 bridge. Did they mean that do we sometimes drive up to the 520 bridge to go to Seattle and or I-5? Why would a Mercer Island resident do that? Well, maybe they thought that some of us would say, gee, I want to help pay for that 520 bridge, so even though I work in Seattle, I'm going to drive north on 405 and take the 520 bridge, pay a full toll so I can help WSDOT pay for that bridge. The survey is not in the best interest of everyone when it does not regard Mercer Islanders' transportation needs as unique. My point is, this survey is worthless. What is the point of it? Looks like political busy work to me. Somebody in some part of WSDOT is putting a check mark in the work assignment log with the comment of, survey completed. And so WSDOT can say, yes, we collected input from the public. The survey is worthless and misleading. So my second question is, where is the survey for Mercer Islanders? No other set of people around the edge of Lake Washington will be hurt more than we will by toll on I-90. Eastgate, Issaquah, North Bend, and Seattle, etc. at least have access to hospitals, cemeteries, movie theaters, auto dealers, college classes, on and on without having to pay a couple dollars each way for a bridge crossing. For us, we have no choice. And now my third and last question, what is being done by this city council to work with its citizens on this issue? the biggest issue we've ever had. How is the council letting the citizens know what they are doing? And how is the council responding to citizens' worry and concern? At the last meeting, many people got up and spoke to the council, and yet we have heard nothing from you. You could have told us something about what you are doing to stop the toll, because our citizens don't want to think that tolling in any form at any price is a good idea or even a done deal. Translate that as no compromise. However, since we haven't heard anything from the council, I'm becoming convinced that most of you would tolerate a toll, since it would be the easiest way for the council to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ralph.
My name is Ralph Jorgensen, 8040 84th Avenue Southeast. I was very discouraged by WashDOT and our state representative's presentation at the last council meeting, specifically the lack of details supporting the scheduled closure of the center lanes for 6 to 8 years, the disproportionate financial burden for all islanders, including residents, employees, and visitors, and most of all, the disingenuous proposal offered by the state. Specifically, I think they stated, we'll always offer a free way on and off the island, and you as an island can decide which side to toll. This tolling either the floating bridge or this East Channel bridge is divisive and economically punitive to Mercer Island. Asking islanders to decide which region, Seattle or the east side, to isolate itself from is a divide and conquer strategy by the state. As a community which requires access to both the east side and Seattle, let's be careful not to pit islander versus islander, but rather make sure that the transits to and from Mercer Island are not disproportionately punitive. The state's proposal has no financial concessions. In the Toll the East Channel Bridge proposal, commuting to Seattle and back and forth would be free. However, it would require full price to go across the East Channel Bridge. Why should a Mercer Island resident, employee, or visitor pay full fare to cross what is effectively half of the I-90 Lake Washington crossing? As islanders, let's make sure we recognize what was offered was not a concession at all. Why should there be a concession? No other way on or off the island? We've already paid for I-90. The proposed toll proceeds for I-90, a federal highway, are planned to go somewhere else. I've estimated the disproportionate impact. All island residents, it looks like it's going to be $10 million per year in perpetuity. That's assuming one round trip off island per household. What is the present value of that annuity? And I would guess it to be a $300 million impact right now. This can have a significant impact to all residents living on, including our senior residents living on fixed incomes, as well as young families that have paid high values for their homes that will most certainly lose value. Off-island teachers and staff, tolling will challenge the district's ability to attract the brightest and best teachers, that like they always have in the past before tolling. The faith community, as I believe Carl just spoke to, the Mercer Island Business and Town Center development, your Mercer Island Youth and Family Services thrift store. I believe you sold $1.2 million worth of product, half of which came from off-island customers. And I think half of that money is going to go away because I don't think thrift customers are going to be paying a toll to shop here. So
Ralph, I have to ask you to wrap up.
All right. So, largest impact to the city. City's representatives, it's imperative that you represent all islanders and challenge the state's plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Tom.
Good evening. I'm Tom Emmerich from 6231 Parkside Lane, a nearly four-decade resident. This is my 2-minute and 27-second version, not the longer version I said for the record. I didn't want to get in any more trouble than I probably already am with a neighbor, and I certainly don't want to get in trouble with your esteemed colleague in the second row. So in any event...
We're a tough group here.
Yes, sir. I-90 bridge tolls for Mercer Island residents and Mercer Island businesses are inappropriate, unnecessary, unfair, and will have a high probability of causing seriously disproportionate adverse effect on Mercer Island. No tolls should be imposed on the I-90 bridge over Mercer Island. If the state unfairly imposes tolls on the I-90 bridge anyway, then relief from paying those tolls needs to be afforded to Mercer Island residents and businesses in some way. We have no other practical choice but the I-90 bridges. The degree of apparent naivete of state-level officials about these proposed toll effects, as well as regional transport planning, growth planning, consideration of fully allocated cost assessment, is simply astounding. There appears to be a major lack of understanding of cause-effect relationship, basic transport principles, induced demand, origin and destination traffic, and failure to consider other better alternatives. These errors, with the failure to appropriately use current tax revenue, apparently have led them to mistakenly conclude that the only answer is tolling the I-90 bridge, which isn't true. I couldn't believe that our council and city didn't challenge the seriously flawed and misleading assumptions and analysis that was shown in the recent WASDOT presentations. Just as an example, virtually any transport expert anywhere could see major flaws in that presentation. It inappropriately and in a misleading way showed data for Issaquah to Seattle segment as somehow being representative of the much more serious point impact delay and distorted Q percentage increase delay that would instead accrue to Mercer Island residents. There were numerous other similar fatal flaws. Some of those are described in my official statement. As a consequence of this entire I-90 bridge tolling political mess, the council needs to, 1, go on record immediately challenging both WASDOT at the regional, state, and federal level. We need to resist any further effort to toll over the I-90 bridge. 2, speak clearly to the state, delaying any unnecessary Mercer Island loss of access to the center roadway, as Mike said. We need to demand continued permanent free SOV access to the I-90 bridge HOV and HOT lanes. And finally, we have to draw a line in the sand requiring that unsound transit do either fix their seriously broken park and ride on the north end or give it to us or sell it to us, and do it before any heavily subsidized and ill-advised train to nowhere arrives on Mercer Island. Now is the time for the council to go on record against this tolling travesty. Yes, tonight.
Look at that. Right to the second. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Klaus Jensen. I live at 9325 Southeast 57th Street on Mercer Island. My family and I have been taxpayers here since 1980 and have greatly enjoyed Mercer Island, and we had hoped to stay here and keep enjoying our retirement here, but what is coming up here is frightening to a lot of my fellow senior citizens. A lot of us will be in a position where we can no longer afford to live here if we have to pay every time we go to the hospital in Seattle or go to see our doctors over in Issaquah. I have already submitted by email to all of you this morning and to the city clerk. So I'd like to use my 3 minutes to sort of amplify and explain how I came to the position that I have, that there's no precedent in federal law to impose a toll on I-90 to pay for lead or anything else on SR 520 or any other state project. And I started this process. It was interesting. I was here at last month's meeting, and we had the state, we had Craig from the state, Washington Dot, and at some point, I think it was the city manager, I asked him, is it okay to put a toll on I-90 to pay for 520? And the interesting answer from Mr. Craig, and now I can't think of his name. Yeah, okay, Craig Stone, thank you very much. It's the old brain that's not functioning quite right. Was that, yeah, there are a lot of federal programs and there are a lot of ways that this can be done. And that was it. So I'm a curious old guy, and I have time on my hands to check into this. So I checked, what is it that is approved? And I went through all the federal rules and regulations that he cited. There was not one single rule that said you can take money from from I-90 and put it on 520 or anything else. It has to be used for that specific interstate. And so I dug in a little bit more, and I found a statement that a couple of years ago, the state of Pennsylvania tried very hard, and it's a big, powerful state. And they thought with Obama in place, they could get their way. 3 times they asked to take money for their interstate I-80 and use it for another purpose, namely whatever budget shortfall they had. 3 times they were rebuffed. Finally, the Secretary of Transportation, no, that's not right. What is he? The U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary, Ray LaHood, came out and stated, there's no way, and I'll try to read it here. After a year spent lobbying states to develop alternative revenue sources for replacing the federal government's rapidly shrinking budget for roads and transit, Secretary of State Ray LaHood rejected Pennsylvania's request to implement tolls on I-90, citing a law that prevents such funds from being used for anything but the roads where they are used. So,
Klaus, with that, I have to ask you to wrap it up.
I just want to finish with my plea. I'm no legal eagle, and I thought, here we have a city attorney that is paid. Why does a senior have to sit and dig this up and submit it when I would like very much the city council to get in front of all us seniors and everybody else and take the lead? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Dan Colton, 8871 Southeast 72nd. I'm a political agnostic. I usually don't show up at these kind of meetings. I usually allow you people to do whatever it is you think is best for us. I don't know what you think is best for us. Nobody knows what you think is best for us. This is a very important issue on this island. After the last council meeting, my wife came home when somebody told her about the tolling. She looked at me, she said, if they put a toll on the bridge, we're leaving. I agree, we're leaving. I don't think we'll be the first. We are the only community in the Puget Sound that is water-bound and stuck on bridges, other than perhaps Bainbridge Island, and I don't see them getting tolls. When the transportation planners for the state of Washington made the projections for the 520 bridge, they blew it. That's not our fault. It's not the fault of the residents of Mercer Island. It's not the fault of the people of the state of Washington. It's the fault of the Department of Transportation. I don't understand why the residents of Mercer Island have to pick up for their mistake. I don't think that we're undertaxed around here. I think we're taxed plenty around here. Our property taxes are not particularly low. We are constrained to an island environment, and we do have to move off island to go and do things that cannot be done on this island. This will be a particular burden on the residents of the city of Mercer Island. And at 1 minute and 40 seconds, I'm going to yield the next minute and a half to the council for you people to tell me what you're thinking, and I'll stand here and wait, please.
Dan, I appreciate your thought on that. We as a council don't interact with citizens during the public comment period typically. And so I guess, and just speaking on behalf of the council on this, the council certainly is engaged on this issue and interested in hearing what the community has to say and trying to figure out what the right moves going forward are.
The community is interested in hearing what you have to say, and we haven't heard it yet.
And you will. And you will.
Can you tell us when we'll hear from you, please?
No, I can't.
Is this on the agenda for debate at any time in the near future?
We don't yet have it on the agenda, no. But I can tell you that our intent is to have a letter to the state by the date they're asking for a letter, which is February 22, I believe. And so there will be debate in advance of that.
I don't even understand why we're giving in to any thought of a toll, given the fact that the past negotiations on I-90 didn't include anything to this effect.
Well, and that's part of the conversation that has to occur, is what's the right position to take. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Welcome, Joy.
Joy Matsuura, 7264 West Mercer Way. At the last meeting, Ms. Bertlin asked about the effect of tolling on Gig Harbor. We are not Gig Harbor. Gig Harbor is on a huge peninsula that has other cities, ferries, and naval shipyard and Costco's. The Olympic Peninsula has lots of low-cost land that can be used by any new business that wants to appeal to people who would rather not pay a toll to go to Tacoma. We are a small, densely built island. Yes, there's vacant retail space downtown, but part of the reason it is vacant is that it is expensive. There may be businesses willing to go after it in the hope that people trapped here by tolling will frequent them. However, we are not serfs chained to the land who must endure whatever tolls and taxes those in power seek to heap on us. Many islanders, as you've heard, are talking about how they intend to leave if I-90 tolling becomes a reality. If there's a mass exodus of people fleeing Mercer Island, who will buy these homes? Speculators that, if speculators get them, that could result in more vacant homes with fewer people to shop at island businesses and less revenue from water usage and utility taxes. Vacant land is nice to live to. Vacant homes are not. And we already have a lot on the island owned by people who are waiting for the market to recover. If tolling becomes a reality, they better be prepared for a very long wait. The people of Mercer Island need you, our elected representatives, to fight for us. Most of you on the council are simply rolling over and debating whether or not to let the state cut off your left hand or your right hand. Just say no. It is not a done deal. Last week, Mayor Bassett was invited to attend an ETA meeting where others were discussing concerns about the proposed tolling. The mayor was reluctant to attend because he felt the council had not developed a unified position. What are you waiting for? 2 weeks ago, you heard from many residents regarding the effect that tolling will have on our future. Tonight, you will probably hear from a few more, as you've seen. If not having a position prevents council members from feeling uncomfortable attending informational sessions, then please vote on one. Even if you feel that your hands are tied and you cannot do much to influence whether or not tolling happens, please let the voters of Mercer Island know how their council stands on the matter. This is happening on your watch. I ask, is the Mercer Island City Council in favor of having I-90 tolled or against having I-90 tolled?
Thank you. Welcome, Ira.
Hey, Bruce.
In Thai, no less.
Ira Appleman, 6213 83rd Place Southeast. Tonight, the council is continuing to consider the performance of Miss Manager Conrad. Last meeting, I joined with 2 council members and many others in calling for Conrad's immediate termination. Since then, Conrad has announced he's getting out of Dodge by the end of the year, and that it's, quote, totally his decision and done exactly the way he wanted it done. I urge the council to terminate our bumbling mismanager forthwith, totally supporting his decision to get out, but to get out now. To review, Conrad solicited sex from the city clerk at an away meeting. Contrary to expert legal advice, the city council only disciplined him for, quote, non-professional personal relationship and threatened termination if it happened again. It did happen again, as evidenced by a series of non-professional personal emails between Conrad and Director Chris Siegel, which the council has, that are at the center of the Lindell scandal that cost the public over $2.2 million. Siegel was trying to get Conrad to reverse the discipline of her employee husband and threatened to resign. City Attorney Bob Sturbank incidentally mentioned the resignation in an email. In the following email from October 8, 2007, Director Chris is writing her boss, Miss Manager Rich. Quote, I feel so violated that Bob sent the attached message to Ed and Glenn. How long have you all wanted me to leave? I understand where your allegiance lies now. You should have trusted me with you could have trusted me with your life. I hope the rest of your team gives you the same. I gave my heart and soul to this organization. I'm totally broken now. Islanders are paying dearly for the soap opera of this city hall. Conrad makes more than the Governor Gregoire, and Siegel makes as much, almost, as the Washington Attorney General. Bad things are beginning to happen on the island as a result of Conrad mismanagement. At the recent council retreat, it was pointed out that islanders are beginning to connect the dots between the incompetent, overcrowded development of the town center and overcrowding in our schools. When Conrad took office, we had guaranteed single-occupant vehicle access to the I-90 HOV lanes and effective veto power over changes on the I-90 bridge. Under his leadership, we are losing special SOV access with tolls imposed without our consent. At the last meeting, when questions were raised about the implementation of R8A, rather than defend Mercer Island, Conrad rushed to the defense of WashDOT. We need competent leadership now. We cannot afford to wait a year so Conrad can save face. There's no need to feel sorry for Conrad. He has fired many excellent employees. I suggest you look at the nasty way he fired Development Services Director Richard Hart. In Conrad's spirit of mismanagement, I urge the Council to deliver the following message to him at the end of tonight's executive session. Happy birthday, and you're fired.
Mean person, you know? You're a really mean person.
You may get sued for all of that, too.
You know, you have no level of decency towards human
We don't
beings.
comment normally. We don't comment. Yep. Let's leave it at that. Sir, welcome.
Members of the council, my name is Rich Hill. I'm going to change the subject and not talk about tolling. I'm legal counsel for the 7800 Plaza condominium, and I'm here to talk about item number 6 on your agenda, the town center amendments. With respect to the 7800 Plaza building, I've sent Scott Greenberg an email today, which he may have shared with you, and would like to propose a tweak to Section 2D of the ordinance. Section 2D of the ordinance. Section 2D basically relates to the parking requirement, and basically it appears to be addressing the situation where there are existing legal leases or financing restrictions on the use of parking for public parking purposes. And the language that I would like to propose to address the 7800 Plaza building is just to add 4 words. Right now it reads, if lease or financing restrictions in existence as of the date of the ordinance, I would like to add, or other legally enforceable use. So it would read, if lease or financing or other legally enforceable use restrictions in existence as of the effective date of the ordinance prohibit use of all or a portion of the parking. The 7800 Plaza building, you may know, is a condominium structure subject to CC&Rs, which prohibit use of parking within the structure for public parking purposes. The parking spaces within the structure can be used for customers of the commercial uses. And with respect to the issue of the ordinance relating to if you're a customer, the city wants you to be able to stay there for 2 hours and walk off, no objection on the part of 7800. It's really the question of public parking there without being a customer. So that's the request. I'm here tonight if any of you have any questions about it, and I appreciate your consideration of this proposed tweak.
Thank you.
Yep.
Welcome.
Hello. John Hamlin, 7406 92nd Place Southeast. Last week I had made a comment regarding privacy concerns with the I-90 tolling and what the implications would be if all of our movements on and off the island are tracked by electronic devices. And I did some more research, and I reached out to some folks, and I kind of made sure my bearings were straight on this. I came across RCW 4756-795, and it does actually explicitly call out restrictions on the use of this data collected and any identification of folks in any way that it would be directed at a specific instance of travel. So to bring that to light, I wanted to first state that there is a law that has been created, and actually I did some more research. It looks like the ACLU and everybody back when the 520 stuff was starting up came together and made this happen, and they were all high-fiving about it, and if you go back and search, you'll see all the news articles accordingly. And then so happens today, this is the Orlando Sentinel, dated today, breaking news, number of officers accused of misusing state driver database skyrockets. And this is in the state of Florida. There's a database system that is restricted use system, and to summarize what's going on with that is that over the last couple years since it came into existence, the misapplication of searching has increased by over 400%. And that this is a tool that's available to ensure the proper enforcement, which is very similar language that we have in our own law, is also in this case. And I haven't dug into it a lot because it just so happened I was looking at it before I left the office this evening, and I was shocked to see that, here's a parallel. So while there is a law in place, and I do want to make sure that's clearly understood, that I understand that there is a law, the concern remains that if it gets so far, and I don't believe it's a foregone conclusion, but if tolling does become a reality for Mercer Island residents, over the long term, there is a black swan opportunity here, and I'll use that term. I don't know if you've all have been introduced to that terminology, but there's a black swan opportunity for inappropriate use of data. And I'm actually going to investigate further and figure out what the retention policies are and stuff. But if I find anything interesting, I'll report back. And on that note, if that happens, I join with the others in concern. I bought a house here about a year and a half ago. I have a young family, and I'm starting to wonder if that was a regrettable decision given this whole issue between the schools, overcrowding, and now this additional cost. It's a real concern. It's really hard to ride a train to go to Home Depot and pick up some sheetrock, or go to Costco and get, like last weekend, God, I don't even want to admit how much I spent there. And so the bottom line is it's a real shift, and unless we're willing to put a Home Depot and a Costco in Pioneer Park, I think we need to stop the tolling issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment period. Thank you all. And move on to, let's see, minutes. Looking for a motion. And
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the minutes.
All right, Mike, I know you had a laundry list.
Yeah, how do you want to
changes,
deal with that?
Did not have a conversation with anyone about how to deal with that.
So Al and I talked this afternoon and suggested that probably the best way to go about each change would be for Mike to make a motion for each change and have the council vote. That way she could get it clear and not have to go back and interpret what was written about the meeting from 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And I say thank you, Mr. City Manager and Mr. Mayor. And I'll make these suggestions fully recognizing that the purpose of minutes is statement of fact. Is that the correct terminology?
They're always to be factual. They aren't verbatim minutes.
Right.
They're to get the gist of what action was taken by the council.
Yeah, okay. And most of these are meant to be paraphrased, but I will add that quite a bit of this could be in quotes, but quotes identify something at a much higher level than paraphrasing. So, without further ado, I'd like to move that the First Amendment is with Mr. Stone's paragraph, beginning of Mr. Stone's paragraph, and it will begin with Mr. Stone stated, "We are just at the beginning of a process to look at concerns to bring to the legislature for a major policy decision."
So, Mike, I think we're going to be dealing with two things here. I'm speaking at least for myself. I did not print out your comments. I'm, of course, not the person who can offer a second anyway. But there's...
All I point out, Mike, is that the main purpose of the minutes is to reflect the actions of this council. It's not to have a verbatim transcript of what people say to the council or what... I mean, there's a public record of that. It's a videotape record. We don't try to capture everything that other people say. What's important, the whole reason to have minutes is to reflect the actions of the council. So we can go through all this, but if we're going to go down this road, we're just going to spend an inordinate amount of time doing this. And so you can make your motions. If someone seconds it, we'll have a vote on it. But that's...
Okay, and you're right about the purpose of minutes are to reflect decisions, but we're of the council, but we certainly, and I don't have any problem with the way we do it, but we write quite a bit more on the minutes than what Robert's literally says is the minimum for the minutes. So, I mean, it's standard that we paraphrase what
Make your
we
motion.
say.
You make your motion.
Okay, so again, I'll make a motion.
Well, so you're on the verge of dying for lack of a second. Let me just ask, in this sort of in the vein of giving you a chance to have the floor short of that, if you want to try and compel us into the value of what is it you're trying to accomplish by doing this?
Thanks,
so
Bruce.
that we understand where you're going.
That's a very good question. And so the purpose of all these amendments or changes is that I went through and I identified that which those speakers talked about, which were critical and civic to Mercer Island. Okay? And although there's nothing wrong with these minutes are very general in nature. That which I identified are very civic issues and terminology that are critical to Mercer Island as we address the I-90 tolling.
Would it, and
So for instance, I'll just use the first example. It has two key words there: beginning and legislature. Okay, frankly, it's paraphrased, but those are quotes from Mr. Stone. So through that presentation we had, it was reemphasized to us in the community that we were at the beginning of this discussion, which is very important to recognize that we are at the beginning of this discussion in talking about tolls and I-90, and so as not to give the perception that all is lost. Because as was said by Mr. Stone, I think Representative Cliburn and a couple, Mr. East, I think it was, said we are at the beginning. That's not reflected in the minutes. Another key word in Mr. Stone in this First Amendment is legislature. And Mr. Stone pointed out that it's up to the legislature to make a bold policy decision. And that's very true. Oftentimes we look at WSDOT. It's not a WSDOT issue. It's a legislature issue. The WSDOT will do what the legislature do, and that was not reflected in the minutes.
So, if I might suggest a possible way out, so I hear where you're going, which is to have a fuller transcript of what was related, such that the public has access to that, and we all have the documentation of that. And I guess I might suggest that minutes are one way to get there, but perhaps a broader dissemination of the video in some respect, or a transcript of the video.
That sounds good, Mr. Mayor. That sounds good.
Alternative way to try and
that sounds good in
what
theory.
You're trying to get to.
That sounds good in theory. It takes a long time, and you'll see this. That's the good news. Or I should say that's the bad news. The good news is I spent a long time on this and couldn't spend a lot of time on the rest of the stuff. So of the meeting. So I probably won't have that many questions. It takes a long time to go through the minutes with the detail that I've gone through, and for the issues that I think are important to highlight as being critical to how we, being critical issues on how we address I-90, or recognize what Mr. Stone or Mr. East or Mr. Lewis was talking about that's applicable to Mercer Island.
Can I suggest, Mike, that instead of going down this road, because then we get into this thing that every one of us can sit here and say, well, I really liked what so-and-so said. I'd really like to have more details of what he or she said in the minutes. And that's good. We're going to get nowhere in that. If you feel strongly about it, you've got your proposal. Why don't you make a motion that it be attached to the minutes for this meeting, that you asked that those were your observations. I'll be glad to second that motion, that it be attached as reflecting your observations and your work on what was said. And then it'll be there in the public records, so there'll be no question about it. But rather than put the council through having to include it in our official minutes as the actions of the council, this will be your actions and the good work that you've done in researching this. So if you make that motion, I'll be glad to second that.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Well, I would like to move that we append to the minutes my observations of important items from that meeting.
I'll second it.
Fight to second that. All right. I'm hearing support in general. Anybody want to speak against? All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Mike, you got it?
Great. Thank you, Council.
Okay. Yeah, nice finding a way out. I was not succeeding at that. So we come back to the minutes as amended. We have a motion and a second for that. So all in favor of minutes as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, thank you. We move to consent calendar. It has 3 items on it.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. We'll move on to regular business. Item 5, Agenda Bill 4795, Solid Waste Interlocal Agreement, Terms Approval. And Glenn.
Yeah, just before Jason leaves and Bruce leaves, just, again, we should always acknowledge when staff does a great job on a project and comes in under budget. And you did it once again, and we appreciate all your hard work in making that happen.
We do, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
And we let you out of here without answering questions, too.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You may recall the interlocal agreement process that happened last year for animal control services with King County. We're now going through a similar process for an overhaul of the 1988 interlocal agreement for solid waste services provided by the county. Most importantly, under this new ILA, the term for the agreement would be extended to reduce bonding costs. That's good news for all of our ratepayers. That's for capital projects, including the upcoming replacement of the Factoria transfer station. The new ILA also includes protections for cities from environmental liability for things like the closure of the Cedar Hills landfill. The Suburban Cities Association helped develop these new protections. Exhibit 1 in your agenda bill talks in detail about the changes in the new ILA. They're pretty extensive, you've seen. This is the first step in the adoption process for the new ILA. The county is asking first that cities indicate whether they are likely to sign on to the new agreement. This is being done through a non-binding statement of interest, which is Exhibit 2 to your agenda bill. Staff believes the new ILA offers important improvements over the old agreement and recommends that Mercer Island indicate it is likely to sign on. Cities are being asked to formally act on the ILA by April 30th. Between now and then, if the council is interested, a briefing on the ILA by Solid Waste Division staff or Suburban City staff can be arranged. So with that, questions?
Okay, questions for Glenn?
You have questions? Mr. Mayor.
Mike?
Thanks, Glenn. I have a couple questions. You had, what does fairly allocate risks mean? What's the policy implications of that?
I believe it's based on the tonnages you contribute to the landfill. So it would your risk would be based on how much you've contributed to filling up Cedar Hills.
Okay, but maybe a better question to ask is, seems logical enough, why isn't it in there now? Why are we adding that as part of the ILA?
Yeah, I don't know all the history, but the agreement dates to 1988, and I think the closure of Cedar Hills was so far off in the future that no one was thinking that far ahead, and now they are. The end is in sight for that landfill. And environmental law has changed.
Well, I mean, in '88 we had attorneys also, so I don't quite understand what the implications of having that in there now versus not.
Well, that discussion was actually triggered by the cities, and Suburban Cities Association helped lead the discussion, and I think the cities felt the agreement didn't adequately protect them. So this was really driven by cities.
Okay. Another question, let's see, does it mean may receive mitigation for impact? What's the, that's in there someplace. No, actually it's the last,
right,
on the last sentence of page 1, may receive mitigation for impacts. Again, explain to me any hidden mines with that statement?
I don't think there are any hidden mines, but cities like Kirkland and Bellevue that host transfer stations for years have felt that the impacts in their communities aren't recognized.
So
they're asking
there
for some
sounds like there's
mechanism.
some financial issues that may come back to us that wouldn't be there otherwise.
I don't think financial, other than when a transfer station is rebuilt or improved. There are probably things to deal with mitigation, deal with traffic impacts and that sort of thing.
So, I mean, is there, that sounds to me somewhat like a blank check for whenever a transfer station goes into a community that they can put a bunch of other stuff on there as mitigating?
I don't think that's not the intent. I don't think it's being looked at. It was just simply to recognize the impact of traffic, trucks, and things like odors for transfer stations. So I don't think other suburban cities that aren't host to transfer stations would have agreed to this language if it was a blank check.
I have a question about the length of this now. So our present ILA goes to 2025, and Cedar has capacity issue or will max out 2023 or so.
Around that.
So I have concern about signing something, and maybe I shouldn't have concern, signing something that goes to 2040. It sounds to me like major decisions could be made in the replacement of Cedar, what's it called?
Cedar Hills.
Cedar Hill. Some major decisions could be made on the replacement of Cedar Hill with us having already signed the ILA, and we've got no leverage on what the decisions will be going forward.
Well, there's only one decision, and that's to long haul waste. When the landfill closes, there's no other opportunity in Western Washington to site a landfill. So there will be a process to select where waste is long hauled via rail too.
Well, more to the point then, we lose Cedar Hill in 2023. It ends, this present agreement that we're operating on goes till 2025. I'm not seeing the benefit on extending it to 2040.
Bonds are typically issued for 20-year periods, so the debt continues even after the landfill closes. The interest rate paid on a 20-year debt is less than a 15-year debt, obviously, so that's the primary economic goal here, is to reduce the debt load.
Are we seeing that we're going to go into a lot of debt? Is that what we're planning?
The division finances most of their capital improvements through bonding.
I feel unprepared to make a decision on this.
Okay, others? Mike?
You don't have to make a decision.
I'm ready to move. Mr. Mayor, move to direct the city manager to sign the non-binding statement of interest to inform King County that the city of Mercer Island is likely to sign the amended and restated solid waste interlocal agreement.
Second.
Actually, the city manager just had a comment. Can you kind of elaborate on what we're signing?
All you're being asked to decide is whether or not to provide a non-binding statement of interest. Just as like we did with this animal control agreement a year ago. The county needs to know pretty close who's in on this agreement so they can allocate out costs and finish off the model. If Mercer Island wanted to go it alone and send its solid waste for the next 40 years to somebody else than King County, then you would decide not to sign this non-binding statement of interest. If you think there's even a small chance that you want to send your garbage to King County, it'd be in your interest to say yes.
Can I ask one more question? Sure. How many cities have not signed this or have shown an intent not to sign?
Most of this was driven by the cities. Every city that I'm aware of intends to sign it.
Okay.
Tom?
So I'm the new representative to the Sound Cities Association, and they just passed this on their Policy Issues Commission or committee the other night. And there's I don't know how many, maybe 30 people sitting around the table, and it was lots of kind of handshakes and congratulations on the negotiation and the work that had been done over the past few years coming to this contract. And so they were, everybody, nobody spoke against it, everyone spoke to it, in fact. And so it was really a very positive reception at the meeting about this interlocal agreement, just as point of information.
I can visualize it. I can visualize the happiness.
It's a garbage love fest. All right, any other comments before we vote on this? All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. We move on to Agenda Bill 4794, Town Center Code Amendments, modifying 60/40 rule for ground floor uses, modifying requirements for no net loss of ground floor retail space, and adding requirements for walk-off parking. First reading. And we're not, I certainly didn't announce that we were doing any more public comment on this at this point, and I know at least one person did speak during regular comment. So that, we'll just move right into this. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. Scott Greenberg, Development Services Director. First, to start off just with a little bit of brief history, I think you probably are all pretty well aware of the history. A lot of it happened before I joined the city, but just for anybody who may be getting into this new. In March of last year, the Council directed staff to initiate a development code amendment relating to ground floor uses in the town center. Staff did that and brought it to the Planning Commission, which held about 5 meetings and a walking tour, and made a recommendation to Council for adoption of a proposed ordinance last August. Council considered that ordinance on September 4th, and then Council did not meet on this subject again until January of 2013, except for the Town Center walking tour. You may remember that in November. And then with Council's direction, staff held a meeting with some of the Town Center property owners and leasing agents to talk about what we've referred to as walk-off parking. The January 2013 planning session, Council gave staff some direction, reached a consensus on several items that we've tried to pick up in the proposed ordinance. So to try to summarize the proposed ordinance is pretty difficult because it's so complex with whether you provide the walk-off parking or don't provide the walk-off parking. There's really 2 options that an applicant can choose to use under this proposed ordinance. If walk-off parking is provided, the current 60/40 rule flips to 40/60. So in other words, the key uses that we want on ground floor in the town center on type 1 streets is retail, restaurant, and personal service uses. Currently, the code requires that a minimum of 60% of the street frontage be allotted to those uses. If walk-off parking is provided, then that percentage drops to 40%. There's a 20% flexibility for the applicant. And then the other uses you see, hotel, motel, public facilities, offices, and services, you would also be able to have 20% more of those uses on the ground floor if the walk-off parking is provided. The second part of this ordinance is what's called no net loss. The current code provision is there on the left. So if walk-off parking is not provided, then an applicant still has to maintain the no net loss provision and comply with that, for example, for a structure. If walk-off parking is provided, then there's a waiver of that no net loss provision. The applicant doesn't have to comply with that. I will say that the other thing that Council reached a consensus on, a lot of the rules the choices that I just mentioned really, in practicality, only apply to existing buildings or buildings that were vested prior to adoption of this ordinance. Because the other thing that you directed us to do is write in language that any new structures built in the town center, any new mixed use or non-residential structures would have to provide the walk-off parking. It would be a requirement of future permitting. So if the walk-off parking is being required to be provided, then the applicant would automatically have this flexibility in no net loss in 60/40 that I just mentioned. So what about parking? The parking provisions we realized that there wasn't a section in the code dealing with what do we mean by walk-off parking. I've actually changed it in the proposed ordinance to just call it public parking. I think walk-off's a good way to talk about it, but I think in the ordinance it's probably more correct to put public parking. And council had talked about several standards that you wanted to see for meeting the requirement for this walk-off or public parking. I already covered the first one. The second bullet, cover that one too, about new town center mixed use or non-residential. The walk-off parking would have to apply to all non-residential stalls in the project. People would be allowed to park there for a minimum of 2 hours and be able to walk off site. The reason I wrote in a minimum of 2 hours was because there is at least one property in the town center where there's 3-hour minimum parking allowed. So we didn't want to limit it at 2 hours, but give the applicant or owner a chance to do something greater than 2 hours if he or she wanted to. Once walk-off parking is provided, it has to remain forever. So there isn't this flipping back and forth with they want to take advantage of flexibility versus not take advantage of flexibility. Once you have to provide walk-off parking, it has to be provided forever. And then I added another provision based on discussion at the council planning session. You did not direct us to do this, but as we're thinking about how to implement this rule, we realize that there should probably be an exception for lease or financing difficulties or restrictions. So for example, we don't know, and Mr. Hill referenced that also in his earlier remarks, we didn't think about condominium associations that might be set up that have restrictions in their CC&Rs. So we wrote in some code official flexibility, and take it or leave it. We just felt like there should be some flexibility to take care of unknown situations that might occur in the future. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, anyone want to start? Mike?
Thanks, Scott. Good presentation. What kind of pushback, other than the lease financing difficulties that you mentioned with the last bullet, have you received from the development community?
I haven't received much pushback, as you put it. We've had some discussion with several property owners or leasing folks about how this just may make it more difficult to lease spaces out, might make it more difficult to build new projects. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. We just don't know. I mean, the one thing that this ordinance sets up, at least for existing projects, is a choice that the developer owner has to make. But for new projects, it is a requirement, and they would have to factor that into their own performance.
How about signage? Did you talk about, assuming this goes through, did you draft up any kind of template for, what the signs would say and how they would indicate what the new rules are?
We did not draft up anything more detailed than what's on Exhibit 2 of your agenda, Bill.
Okay, yeah. Good.
And in talking with several owners and leasing folks earlier or later last year, between November and January, they felt that just a simple message of complimentary parking or 2-hour customer parking without identifying who that customer might be would be the way to do it.
Sure. And finally, has anyone mentioned potentially setting some of those sites aside for, car sharing or something, like Car2Go or Zipcar, for instance?
No, that has not been mentioned.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that the codes for new buildings, that's been changed?
If this ordinance is adopted, then yes, all new buildings, all new mixed-use and non-residential buildings built in the town center would have to provide this walk-off parking.
Okay. I misunderstood you. What it sounded like is that the regulation has been changed for new buildings. It's after we talked about
assuming you adopt this.
I thought you were, okay. You haven't got any pushback from developers?
No, we really haven't. I mean, we haven't made lots of phone calls. We did alert some in the development community. The people that we sent the original invitation to meet with us on parking, we sent them a notification, informal notification that this meeting was happening tonight. Several folks are in the audience, but other than the fact of just some folks telling us that it's going to make things more difficult and could end up killing projects in the future. But again, we don't know. We don't know whether that's true or not.
What could kill projects? What makes it more difficult? The 60/40 or?
Having to provide the walk-off parking.
So you're saying, right, we don't know, but what's your gut feel on what it will do to the development of the central business district?
We just really don't know. I mean, a lot of it depends on the financing package that somebody's able to put together, and what potential lessees might want in terms of a lease. You know, would a restaurant be willing to sign a lease in a new building, for example, if they weren't guaranteed that there would be parking available for their customers, that somebody going to a business across the street might be parking there? That we just don't know, and actually nor does the development community know exactly what would happen.
Mike, I'm going to ask just a clarifying, or I'm sorry, Scott, I'm going to ask a clarifying question here for just a moment, because your comments are catching me a little bit off guard, saying there hasn't been pushback, and so I just wanted to unpackage that just a little bit, because I had the pleasure of sitting in the meeting where we talked about the walk-off parking with you and Rich and some folks who are in the audience and quite a few other developers, and there was very active pushback at that meeting. And I think what you're referring to now is more recently there has been less comment. But could you just explain the context of your comments, if you could?
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking of it being more recently, since this ordinance has been drafted. I haven't really gotten much pushback. You're right, at the meeting that we sat in on, I think it was the end of October, there was a very clear message from those in the room that this was a bad idea. Okay. But that's all the pushback, that I've received from it.
Debbie?
A clarifying question along the lines of yours, and that is, you said that you contacted some of the developers, et cetera. I think it would be an appropriate response to reach out to all that we have on record or database in order to give them ample time to provide feedback. If this was drafted and, for example, available to council, I believe as of last Thursday, it provides some amount of limited time and or awareness that it is going on. So I think it's extremely important that in the nearest possible future there be an extended communication process that goes on to make sure that there is.
Just on that point, Scott, did you send out an email to all the participants in that meeting last fall?
Yes.
With basically the substance of this ordinance?
The parking meeting, yes.
Yeah. So to the extent we define all as everybody that showed up the last time, and it was a pretty good-sized group, then they got noticed.
And I think it was broader than everybody who showed up. It was your original list that you sent out, so it's people who didn't come to that meeting even got the email.
Okay, other questions? Rich, I know I was CC'd on some of the email you had going today with a couple folks. I was wondering whether you wanted to weigh in on where you were going with that, what you got back from it, or if I'm catching you off guard, just wave no thanks and I won't go there. But,
well, I'll paraphrase the results of a couple of emails. One of the points that you guys at your planning session asked us to think about was, what is the effect on a developer or a property owner vis-a-vis their financing, the underwriters on new projects, commitments made in leases for existing property owners and lessees. and how might this ordinance impact those commitments. And so Scott called one developer, I called another. Both are developers known to you and known to the island, and to people we've had dealings with. And I think we got, in both cases, a mixed bag answer that it was sort of not really sure how people will respond in the future. It could have some negative impacts. It may be just fine. I did speak with or exchange emails with Peter Orser, and you know Peter, he's in charge of development for Weyerhaeuser and used to be on this council and planning commission. Peter's response, and I think he was consistent with the meeting we had when we were all talking about the town center. He still urges us to look at some sort of a town center parking management district and have everybody contribute a small amount to do unified public parking or parking management, both public and private, and have the same rules applying to everybody and do it as part of the district. I've sort of been on board with that from the beginning and urged it. Haven't gotten anywhere with it, but that was kind of where Peter came from. As far as impacting leases and financing, he says, yeah, it might have an impact on leases. You might have to go back and make some adjustments on the leases. And the financing, he says it would just vary from project to project.
Dan, you want to go?
I had an exchange with Scott and Rich today over language in this thing, and I'll circulate copies of what I am going to propose, and to my amazement, it also actually addresses the point that Rich Hill made before, which I'll explain. But let me circulate this and try to address, if that's okay, some of the issues I see in this thing. And Scott has reviewed it, and Scott, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as I understand it, from a development services standpoint, you don't have any, there's nothing in here which you have causes you pause or objection or...
Right, except the date, which you and I talked about.
I understand.
You can get there.
Okay. So all this is just amending paragraph 6, which is what's referred to as the public parking, and it's intended to address a few points which are just to make. I won't go over the drafting issues because I've already communicated with Katie about one concern I had in the drafting, and the language I didn't think made sense from a drafting standpoint, but I changed that. But on the substantive, on A, I've made it clear. I made it clear what the lease exception is, and made it clear that the exception applies to leases that were in effect at a certain time where the spaces were signed as being dedicated for a certain tenant, but that exception expires when the lease is next changed, and so it's not something that just because there's a lease in effect today, that means in perpetuity you get out of the public parking requirement. And I'm not saying that's what Scott's thing necessarily did, but it was unclear to me how that worked together. But so A is directed to that. B again addresses more the issue of the time period. From my perspective, it should specifically state that it's completely up to the owner to set the time period. It could be, but it can't be less than 2 hours. So I wanted to expressly state that. C addresses a little bit what Rich was talking about. I don't have a problem with saying that if a person is going to park in a building, they need to be at least intending to patronize one customer in that building. And then if they decide that after they go to that one business, they want to walk off and visit at someone else, then that's fine. I think, and so I think from the standpoint of the owners, hopefully, and from what Rich was saying, that would satisfy his concerns, and he's shaking his head, so that's positive. But also it's also to try to address the financing problem, because if there is a financing problem, the way it was described to us at the planning session was that it would, that if you had parking which wasn't specifically stated as being for use for tenants in the building, then somehow that could be a violation of a covenant in a loan agreement. So the intention of C is to, if there is that issue, then it should enable the owner to get around that. And D is no different from, in concept, from what Scott had proposed. So I put this in front of you, and I know what happens when I draft things, that people get nervous. So I did provide it to staff in advance, but it's what I'm trying to do is come up with language that's clear, exactly what we had talked about in the planning session, and also to maybe even go one step further and address the comment that Rich made. Because, the last thing I want any owner to perceive is we're saying we're grabbing your property and have nothing to do with the people in your building. We want to encourage owners to put in good tenants and good businesses and draw people to them. We just want them to not create an environment in the town center which ends up with people having to get in their car and drive 100 yards in order to go to the next retail business across the street. So that's the purpose here.
Other questions?
Let me ask you a question.
No, I'm sorry, Dan, that was my error. I didn't mean that as a slight.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean that at all as a slight to you, because I'd asked you to speak, and I knew what you were going to speak on.
I do have a question on B, Mr. Mayor. Does that mean an owner could make public parking stalls available from 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's it?
No.
If you read it literally, is that what that means?
No, it's not intended. The intention is for such time period in terms of duration, whatever duration that's
should be available 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean,
24/7.
I think would be the way it would be read. But if Katie or Scott feels that's unclear, then we can change that.
I guess I have one more. Go ahead, Tom.
I have one question, kind of following up on what Mike asked about electric charging. Would this preclude a new development from putting in an electric charging station and having that be restricted to electric charging only, or for a minimum of 2? I wouldn't like this to preclude that option. And in fact, it would be great to include specifically maybe public parking or electric charging, just to encourage that use. So do you think this would preclude the way it's written now?
I don't think so.
Plus, I think most owners, if they're going to put in electric charging stations, are putting it in for residents more than they're putting it in for people using the retail uses. Would be my guess. And this does not impact resident parking.
So, Scott, we don't know what this is going to do, right?
We don't.
Right. Do we know, what do you think would happen if we just got rid of the 60/40? And when I say it, the purpose of this is to address the vacancy issue that we have in the area. If we just got rid of the 60/40 rule, what do you think would happen then? Or, if you're not prepared to, how do you think the owners or managers would think that they would be able to attract or fill up those vacancies?
Well, we already know there's at least one building where they're trying to get a healthcare provider into that building and cannot due to the current rules. So I would speculate that we might see some vacant spaces being leased, but probably not in retail, restaurant, or personal services. Otherwise, they would have
That is, if
already
we got
been
rid of
leased.
the 60/40.
Right, if it was just wiped off the books altogether. Yeah. And there may or may not be less activity on the sidewalks. Some of the businesses, some of those types of businesses do generate some street activity. But I know you've had that debate in the past, and I don't want to reopen that debate.
Okay. Anyone else want to pipe up at this point? I'll weigh in then. And this is moving, I guess, shifting more towards comment, but maybe with a bounce back to Scott along the way, since I'm not quite sure where I'm going yet with it. Having heard this vision that Dan has offered of walking throughout the town center, I like it. I think it's a nice vision and one that is worth aspiring to. But I also sat with Scott and Rich here and listened to a full audience of folks who said it was going to be a significant problem for building owners, managers, developers. And I then end up beginning to try and weigh okay, so we've got a community benefit of this walk-off, or of allowing walk-off. How much am I hearing from the public about that? To what extent is there a real issue today? Because in reality, what happens is people walk off today, and there is no enforcement of the fact that you can't walk off. And on the other hand, this concern that there's a very real potential impact on growth, construction downtown, and very clear messages that we've heard that 60/40 is onerous right now, and so the idea of changing 60/40 and removing no net loss, I weigh that into it. And where I'm landing right now, as I look at this, is personally, I think we drop no net loss, we turn 60/40 into 40/60, and we continue to work on this idea of a shared parking in some form, but we don't link it. And I know that Dan will have a response to that, because I just know he will. But Mike's going to get the first go at that. But that is my sense of how to play this thing. And just to wrap up, I guess if the will of this council is to move forward in this vein, I would really like to see us actually have diagrams of some buildings with parking stall layouts and an understanding of what parking is allocated to what use and what the implications are. And sort of, as Peter Mercer said, let's actually understand some lease and loan agreements that are out there, so that we get to the heart of what the real impacts are on these guys. Because right now it's stated as a serious burden, but I can't get my arms around just what the impacts of that are. So that's my speech. Mike, and then Tana.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks again, Scott, for your presentation. As you can imagine, I'm having a hard time thinking that we should take these provisions and make them weaker than they are being proposed in this particular agenda bill. Mainly because, many members of this council went through a lot of work and time in order to develop this package to hopefully realize the vision that Dan and others have spoken to, and that's making the downtown pedestrian friendly and making it as easy as possible for people to move to and through the downtown. And we upped the ante on number of stories that the developers can go up significantly, and that was a big deal for Mercer Island. So I would not at all be willing to weaken what we're currently proposing for that reason, because the public, quite frankly, deserves to test out how can we, given the current structures and the ones that are being proposed, how can we make that a downtown that is far more friendly to walk and shop. I agree with Dan, the validation issue of coming into a particular parking area and at least going to one business. I mean, that's pretty much consistent across the country. So, I mean, that could be a project that the chamber and the developers come to an agreement on to figure out, okay, how do we have a validation of use, and how is that enforced, albeit, even an honor system or voluntary, whatever. But I think that would be a good project for the chamber and the current business owners to take on. Lastly, I've had a number of friends who have operated businesses downtown, and quite frankly, it hasn't been a case of current code. It's been a case of rents that have been too high. So I think it's interesting that we're willing to bend the code around to help the developers when I haven't seen the same thing on their end, lowering the rents to attract, or in particularly to keep businesses that were doing fairly well, to keep them downtown. So I think there are a lot of other and I think, Mike, you would appreciate this, a lot of other private sector approaches other than trying to tweak the code that would work, and one would be the old supply and demand. And if we've got empty spaces, I would urge the chamber and the current business owners to look at ways to provide incentives to keep the businesses and lower rents in order to attract other businesses.
Donna, and then Mike.
Thanks. When looking at this proposal, this agenda bill, I was trying to think about what do we want our town center to be. And I think we want it to be a vibrant, lively center where people are milling about and walking about and able to stay local for most of their shopping, or as much of their shopping as possible, and dining here and really enjoying the town center. And I think we all realize there's quite a few empty storefronts, and we're also coming out of a recession. And so I really started talking to a lot of people, both shoppers and the local businesses in the area, to try and get some different perspectives on, what this might mean. And basically what I came away with, something needs to be done, but not much, I would say is the sum up that I heard. And so I'm very supportive of this bill as it is written, because I think flipping the 60-40 is some of that, something, but not that much, and will hopefully attract more tenants, which will then increase foot traffic. And I think the parking is really important, because I think it'll allow us to, and the chamber, to promote shop local, to promote people coming down, and that to say, there's plenty of parking, and to tell people where they can park, and really have that be something where we don't have to, you can park here but not there, and for a few hours, and maybe not, but walk over here, to really have a unified structure. And so I think going forward, that would be the ideal, that any new building would also have this, so that we're really creating an entire system downtown where people can park for 2 hours, get out of their car, and walk around and shop locally. And 78th Central, they have 3-hour parking. They have friendly, welcoming signs, and businesses I talked there didn't seem to have any problem. I was always able to park in that building. So the onerousness of enforcing 2 hours or making sure that people have 2 hours, I obviously could be incorrect, but I'm not seeing how that's going to be overly onerous. So I'm in support of this.
Okay, Mike?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I agree with the mayor on this. Certainly, if it was up to me, I would get rid of the 60-40 altogether, because I think we don't need to be in that business of telling storefront owners what they can or can't, what business they can and cannot do. We need, the purpose why this is brought forward to the council was to address the vacancy issue on the island. And then this parking thing was piggybacked it on as a way to get something for an ill-gotten gain in the first place, I think, the 60-40. Supply and demand with stores, certainly that probably has an issue, a part of it, but not necessarily. We know for a fact that there's a dermatologist who would like to rent in the Central Business District at the going rate, but he can't because of the 60-40 rule. Especially in this time of a lot of change on the island because of external forces, the business owners need the flexibility to hit the market rate, and we are preventing that flexibility. So certainly if I was writing this thing, I would get rid of the 60-40 or 40-60 completely, but I recognize that I don't get my way every time that I want. So to that point, I support the mayor in his suggestion, and that is to do away with no net loss and change it to the 40-60. Are we saying 40-60? Yeah,
we can, yeah.
Or 60-40, whichever way it is. But break away the parking requirement from it.
Debbie, and then Dan.
Okay, thank you. In light of the council retreat, I'll try to keep it brief, and I'll try to keep it something that maybe is different or provides a different perspective on what's been said to date. The first thing is that I really would like to see us make a concerted effort to gain public input, and in particular development input and store owner input when we have the second reading or the first reading, depending on what happens here tonight. I think that's incredibly important. We had a robust amount this summer. We had some this fall. We've revised it. Let's make sure we're getting that again. I do support the amendment that is encouraging, shall we say, the patronizing the in-house or in-building retail and or businesses that are there as a component. I think that's important to encourage people to use the facilities where they're parking. Where I'm struggling right now is that there seems to almost be a contradiction. We talk about the fact that the businesses right now are allowing walk-off without enforcement, that in fact there really isn't an issue and people should feel free to do so. Yet when we talk about enforcing that or putting that into some form of ordinance, there's resistance and it becomes a restriction or an impediment. And I'm not understanding why it suddenly becomes an issue when it gets written into development code. And I'm very open to understanding in more detail why that is, but it's not, there's 2 points there that I'm not connecting logically on my own. Also, when we were at the chamber lunch, it was last week or the week before, it was interesting as they talked about some of the new businesses that were coming onto the island. And I tried to do a quick tally. What was interesting to me is the notable ones, at least that stood out in my mind, were going into the older developments. They were not going into the newer developments. And I'm sure there's multiple reasons. The first one I think that I come to is perhaps the same as Mike's, and that is it based on rates, fees, and overall cost associated, in which case I think that there's some room for discussion and debate there. And then finally, I asked myself, what is the impact of at least 300 new residents in the town center going to mean? If I understand correctly, the new facility opens this summer across Aviera, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So again, that immediately should bring at least 300 people into the town center, shopping at existing and hopefully new retail and professional storefronts. So I'd like to think that that will be another shot in the arm in terms of the potential commercial activity down there. So long story short, I'm actually supporting the proposal as amended by Deputy Mayor Grouse.
Dan.
Thank you. I was part of the process that the committee that Mike Grady was referring to before that put together the last set of amendments to the development code together with Peter Orser and others. And we did that in full partnership with the property owners in town center. And as I've told this council before, one of the questions we raised during those discussions is what's going to happen about parking. And we were assured during those meetings that we would not get signs which said that your car will be towed if you walk off the property. And that's what happened. And I also appreciate the irony that Debbie alluded to, and that is that the signs are up there, but right now they don't seem to be enforced. Yet at the same time, the owners are again saying to us that we should not require this because, again, we really don't mean what we say, but we just like putting up these signs to tell people they can't stay on can't park on our property. So it's a very strange phenomenon we're dealing with. So here we are, and we're being asked to relax the code to enable the dermatologist that Mike referred to, and I'm sure other professionals who may want to set up offices on the island have the opportunity to do so. And what we're saying is the quid pro quo for that is we want you to do what you said you were going to do when we put this development code in place. And that is create a sense of community in our town center where people can feel that they are welcome, where they are encouraged to shop locally, and that they can come together and use our town center truly as a community, and that it's a community which includes the owners and the developers and the residents. And so that's what we're trying to achieve. And is this legislation necessarily going to get us there? I don't know. I have no idea. But what I do know is that if we don't try, and if we don't try to make some progress towards a sense of community, that then shame on us for not doing our job as a city council. And I'll say one last thing. I hope, to me, the optimum thing that would come out of this process is that the owners would come back to Rich after this is passed and say, okay, we now want to figure out a way to come up with some sort of parking district that works for the entire city. Because now we got some buildings which have 2-hour parking and some buildings that don't have 2-hour parking, and that's a hodgepodge. It's really not good. And I wish that after this process is over, the owners will come back to Rich and say, we need to figure this out, and we want to enter into a binding parking district that works for everybody. And to me, if we accomplish that, that would be fantastic. So I see this hopefully as a means to an end, and I'm hopeful we get there.
Are we going around the horn again, there, Mr.
Well,
Mayor?
I'm going to give Jane a shot here first because she hasn't had one yet, and then you'll be up next.
It's always hard to follow Dan. But I guess I'd like to say that I feared in this process that we would do too much and be too drastic at the wrong time. We're right on the cusp. We're seeing lots of new development starting. The recession is abating somewhat. We're seeing more interest in our town center, and the economy seems to be turning around. Light rail will be coming across. Who knows how tolling, if it happens, will affect the town center. It could be positive, in fact, if that happens. We don't know. But I would hate to do something that would put a lot of doctors' offices, and I have nothing against them, in our town center with long-term leases that would go on for 15 years and really kill the downtown as a retail place. So I'm comfortable with the idea of flipping the 60-40, and I'm happy to get rid of the no net loss. I would certainly not be amenable to doing anything further, and I'm struggling with the idea of tying with parking, but I think I'm going to come around to be in favor of this proposal. It's an option for the existing buildings, and I certainly want to see a friendly town center that's not filled with signs threatening towing. I don't know what will happen tying these two together. I mean, it's two moving parts. We don't know what changing the 60-40 to 40-60 will do, and tying that to parking, we're not sure either. It will be hard in the long run to be able to judge 5 years down the road what had the most effect and what changed. So it will be hard to measure, but I'm leery about tying those together, but I'm leaning towards supporting this measure.
Mike, before you go again, because you said around the horn, I'm going to suggest that it might be time for us to get a motion on the table, unless you've got something new to add to the conversation.
There's no,
it's a first reading.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. I'm a little bit
There's
confused.
only feedback then
giving
at this
us
point.
feedback
Okay,
on
thank you.
some of the major provisions. I think you know what the list is.
Okay.
It's what's before you, plus some amendments, and I think Scott pointed out that there was a provision about code official discretion, which I think you have suggested is replaced by the amendments. So validate all that. We'll come back with an ordinance for second reading.
So, yeah, so what I think perhaps the burning question before us is, are we moving forward with what Dan has proposed, or are we moving forward, because it sounds like we are moving forward based on what I've heard so far, the ordinance as written by Scott. Are you folks comfortable?
Well, I think there's a third one,
trying-
Mr. Mayor, you suggested. You had a suggestion there.
It didn't have traction. And you and me doesn't count for a majority, I don't think. So I was ready to acquiesce.
I'd like to make one, I'm sorry. Well,
go ahead, Mike.
I'd like to make one comment about there are legal issues which will probably prevent the adoption of this shared public parking is once the owners identify public parking, then they have legal issues and liability, and that's the dichotomy that we're faced with. Once we put, as the mayor said, it's posted no parking and leaving, but people do it. The owners don't chase after them. The owners don't tow cars. But if they were to make that step and say public parking is allowed, then they're very apprehensive to do that. They won't do that because of legal litigation.
Mike?
Similar to Tana and my suggestion, Scott, you've added in 2D this lease and finance restriction, so it's kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card if you can demonstrate you've got some leasing or financial issues. Was wondering if my fellow council members would support adding to that to allow for a reduction in the amount of public shared parking if stalls are dedicated towards a car sharing program or electric vehicle charging stations, for instance.
I think this ordinance doesn't address the amount of parking, does it, at all? So I don't know that your suggestion would fly, because this does not get to the amount, the number of stalls required by, according to a certain use of the property.
Right. It deliberately doesn't call out a specific number. It just applies to all non-residential parking.
Non-residential
parking. To 100% of the non-residential parking.
Yeah, and see, that's where I think, if you've got like a car-to-go or some other program and that building or development is supporting it, then it may be captured in the residential parking, but it may also be a program where, it's providing car sharing to those other than residents in that particular facility.
I mean, Mike, I don't have an issue with that, but I mean, what you're really, I think, saying is that instead of saying all parking stalls, all non-residential stalls have to be subject to this, you want to say that another exception would be if the owner has designated certain stalls as specifically only for electric vehicles or for car share type programs. And if that's the desire of the council, I think that gives the owners more flexibility if they want to have that, and it serves you. I don't have a problem with that in concept. But again, I think it should be very clear that, and I'm sure Katie and Scott can come up with language just saying that this doesn't apply to stalls which are specifically for those purposes. But that has to be very limited, though, saying that the stalls can only be used then for electric vehicles or for car share type deals. And I mean, if we want to get down to that level of minutia.
Okay.
But can I mean, just I don't.
Let's get some order in here. I mean, are we going to go around again, Mr. Mayor?
Well,
I mean, I'll be more than happy to restate my point again to be the last person to talk.
It's a new point, Mike. I don't know why you're. Mike raised a new point, and it's being responded to. So if you want to talk to his new point, go talk to his new point.
I think to the question of how do we proceed through this conversation is a fair one, though, at this point, and so and clearly there needs to be some feedback about whether we're settling on this or settling on the language that's in the agenda bill as written, right? So,
and what I would suggest. I mean, I don't think that. I mean, the only substantive change, the two substantive changes that are in here, from what staff had put in, was on requiring that at least one of the businesses that you're going to patronize be in the building. That's a substantive change, and I haven't heard anyone speak against that. And second, it took out the so-called financing exception, because to me it was, at least in my opinion, the way it was written was there was no clear guidance given to Scott or the future code officials on exactly how the financing exception was supposed to work. And it just, and plus I as, you know, not for the reasons that Rich gave, but it's basically what was described to us at the planning session as the reason for the financing problem is because we were telling people that they couldn't limit parking to people who were going to go into the building to use some in the building. So by putting in this other provision, we effectively dealt with that. And at the end of the day, if someone has a financing problem, then maybe they can't take advantage of this, and then they have to go and get their financing clarified, and they can do that. No one's forcing them to do this for existing developments. So this is, I just felt the financing exception was too broad. So, yeah, what I would suggest to the council is that if what I've just said makes sense, then we let Katie and Scott take what I've written and what they've written and come back on second reading and make whatever changes. And if people want to, the majority supports what Mike has just referred to, they can add language to cover that as well.
All right, so we've got Dan's version, Scott's version, and the let staff mush it all together version, if I'm hearing correctly.
Well,
and then on top of that, we've got...
but that's second, by definition, between first and second reading, let staff mush it all together is exactly what, that's what the process is.
I just need to get to council members either nodding their head yes for one or another, or... So are you comfortable with Dan's suggestion that we let staff try and merge it at this point?
As long as it includes this.
Okay, so I see council support for staff work on putting it together. Mike's suggestion that there be a charging element to this.
And ride sharing.
And ride sharing, thank you. Support or not for having them work on that? Okay,
Question on that. It seems to me that if we're talking about specific types of parking stalls, ride sharing, electric charging stations, or handicapped or whatever, that's addressed elsewhere in the code, isn't it? With numbers of stalls based upon, for the given building. It seems to me that it should that talking about electric.
Let me suggest that we ask staff to also have a look at that, because I think it's a fair question, and we ought to have answers to that at the same time.
It is. Maybe I can add to that, though. The electric car provision, I thought you were going to ask this question. What I'm looking at are the charging stations themselves, not the cars themselves. So you could have a development, that's got a bunch of Nissan Leafs and, Teslas in it, and they would say, well, gosh, we're not going to provide any public parking because they're all electric cars. No, I'm looking at the non-residential component. So for the car sharing, that could be non-residents that are using the car sharing. For the charging stations, most, if not all of the charging stations on Mercer Island that have been installed through a grant, and they'll continue to be, they have to be accessible to the public, other than those that are just living in the building. So that, again, gets to that non-residential line in there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
And just to clarify, I think you said ride sharing, and I think it's more car sharing than ride sharing. Ride sharing sounds carpool. Car sharing is like rent a car, car to go, zip car type thing. So it's if you have a car to go type place, not a carpool.
Okay.
Flyer wagon with
All right. I'm going to reiterate obviously my initial stance was not a winner, but I will very specifically ask that as we move forward on this, that staff connect with some of the developers and look at the folks in the audience here. I want to understand a lot better what this actually looks like on the ground, in the sense of how does a building lay out, how does the parking get allocated today, how would it get allocated under this, and what are the implications for building owners, building managers, very specifically. What we heard before was this is enough to potentially stop projects. What we've heard recently is, well, maybe, maybe not. I'd like to get clarity on that, and to the extent that you guys can work with our staff to provide that clarity, it'll go a long way towards informing this conversation. And if it doesn't happen, I think you know where this is going to land if that's not there. So let's get that clarity and understand exactly what the implications are as best we can.
We will make the effort to contact everybody that's been talking to us in the past. But if they don't respond, then they don't respond.
If they don't respond, yeah. At the end of the day, Dan, what we're deciding is what's going to happen within these buildings. I'm asking for information, right, as part of making this decision. And I think it would be a mistake if we tried to move forward with that. So, okay. Anyone else? Input? Anyone else want to shoot my idea down along with Dan here? I mean, I'll give you a chance to tell me I shouldn't ask that.
I'm just saying it's not, typically individual council members do not at the end of the debate go out and make an appeal to the public to come in and support their position. That's not the way it works. So that's just not the way it's done.
No. What I'm asking is for a reiteration of what we've heard previously, and what didn't happen, I think, through this most recent bit of the process. So, okay. Scott, anything else?
No, I think it's clear. We'll come back.
Okay.
Either February 4th or 25th, depending on how long it takes us to pull everything together with the second reading.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move to other business. Council member absences.
I will be absent the February 25th and March 4th.
Anyone else? Planning schedule. Yeah, I know Tana's got one for planning schedule.
I noticed that April 1st is during Mercer Island School District spring break, so I would like to propose that we move that date to maybe the following Monday.
Look at that month.
If we're going to do that, I might ask to move the next one to the following,
That's
so the 2-week gap between the meetings.
That's where I'm going, because it beats up staff when we have back-to-back Mondays. And we may still get a back-to-back out of this.
Did anyone check when Passover is also? Tana, is there when it is?
It is.
It begins Monday, March 25th, and ends Tuesday,
Okay,
April
that's
2nd.
fine.
Yeah.
So I think if we went
Thanks,
April
Alex.
8th and 22nd, actually, we don't have any back-to-back Monday meetings. Ally, take a look.
What would be the dates?
8th and the 22nd.
8th and the 22nd. It's a 5-Monday month.
Yeah.
So it actually could work.
So I'm not here on the 8th.
You got your spring break?
I have split spring breaks, and that's the one that we're taking off.
Okay. Got to do it by popular demand, I think. I miss the first. Tana misses the first, or do you just sort of?
I'll miss the first.
I definitely miss it. Mike, you miss the first as well?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. 8th, Mike Sura misses. Anyone else miss the 8th? Okay, and then let's look at the other two, the 15th and 22nd. Is there any problem with shifting the 15th to the 22nd for anybody?
No.
It's tax day.
Tax day,
Yes.
yeah, right.
I don't know, I think it's inappropriate for us to move off of April Fool's Day, you know.
That's a good reason. Yeah.
Okay, let's call it the 8th and the 22nd.
Okay.
Apologies to Mike Zero. Anything else on the planning schedule? Let's move to the, I guess, planning schedule in general then. Yeah.
There aren't any particular additions. February 4th is packed. I'm going to have to make some adjustments there. If we can, well, I'm going to have to make some adjustments. There's too many things there. The staff has a retreat coming up next week, and we will take your work agenda, your work plan, and spread it out across the year. So that's why you don't see much at all in succeeding meetings. We haven't done that work yet.
I actually have a comment that's specific to the 4th, but I think hits a broader topic that we heard about extensively tonight, and that is the community looking for a position from the council on I-90 tolling. When we finished up the planning session on the process, I think Rich and Bruce know that I sent a short email just asking what the time frame and the milestones are and how the council would be moving forward. The response I got was that we would be debating and discussing in advance, I believe, of the 22nd of February, which is when technically we have a response due back to WashDOT. And the comment was the 4th and the 18th, or I suppose the 25th, would be the times when we would have that public debate, discussion, call it what you will. But I don't see that here, and I have to say I agree very strongly with the sentiments expressed tonight that we need to come out, we need to make a strong statement, and it needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Can I comment? I think, if we look back on the I-90 documents in the last few years, this City Council, Mercer Island City Council, not all of us individually, but the Mercer Island City Council has come out in letters against tolling on I-90. That has been the Mercer Island's official position. I think now the question is, this council made up here has to decide, do we agree with this official position that the city has held for a long time, and if so, what do we do about it? So, I don't think, for me, there's not a debate about are we for or against tolling, at least in my opinion, but our position is we are against tolling.
Debbie's right, though. We have, on February 2nd, you'll have a meeting with the former mayors, and you're going to hear a lot. I think it's a conversation that you're going to have together and with them, but I think you're going to get sort of the whole thing steeped from experience from the past. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be expected by your constituents to have a public discussion about where does that take you? What letter are you going to write to the state for this scoping period? And right now that deadline is the 22nd of February. By the end of this week, I'll know whether or not we've got a little more time. We're asking for some more time. And we'll find that out. I'm hopeful, but who knows? You will need to have a conversation and come to agreement about what the letter says. And let me say it over and over again. This isn't the last time you're going to talk about I-90 tolling. I sense from the public, from the interest groups, from the council, everybody wants to come to the final decision on tolling today. And the legislature is going to see it for a year. So it's okay, folks. Let's resist. Let's fight back. Let's have a big fight. But you don't have to have everything decided today. So just take it in the right steps.
I'm not encouraging that we have everything locked and loaded, but I think there's a directional statement, a principled statement that can be made fairly soon.
Right.
And I wouldn't want us to avoid that for lack of details and, extensive discussion of ifs, thens.
Right.
But I think a principled statement is something that we should be able to come to quite
fairly quickly. I don't think
clearly.
The issues are so complex that you can't really come to those principles pretty quickly.
Because the two events that I see coming up, so we've got the WashDOT session here on the island, I believe it's on the 29th, 4 p.m. at CCMB. Mm-hmm. And then we have the former mayor's discussion on the 2nd, which should be able to further elaborate and, enrich the history and the context. But, you talk about the 4th being a busy agenda. The conversation, in my opinion, needs to be there on the 4th.
Right, and it should be on this page right now, and it's not. But we'll have to do some serious adjusting of the schedule to carve out the sufficient time, because it'll take quite a bit of time.
I think it's going to take multiple sessions, and I can't think of much that is on here that is more important than starting the conversation respectfully and time appropriately now.
Okay, so that'll be added on the 4th. I think it's going to have to be, because we got to get to the letter right around the 23rd.
Can we just understand, this is a scoping letter for scoping for an EIS?
Yeah, in effect, it's an EA, but an EIS.
Okay, but I think then, before everyone gets excited about a scoping letter, understand what a scoping letter for an EIS is. You're telling the state what you want them to study, what environmental impacts you want them to study. This is not addressed to the decision makers, this is addressed to staff, so that the decision makers then end up having all the information they need. So the discussion on the 4th and the 25th, to the extent, or the 4th, to the extent it is tied to the letter of the 22nd, should be a discussion of what elements we want to include in the EIS review. And we shouldn't spend 3 hours beating ourselves up and having the public beat themselves up talking about the evils of tolling, because that's not what the purpose of this letter is. That doesn't mean that, no, we don't take more public comment. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have what you're talking about, Debbie, that we need to come up with a position on tolling, but it's not something we need to feel like we got to stick into.
Most immediate deadline is a process.
I won't recognize you, so relax.
I do agree that there is a distinction between a position on tolling and the letter, but one should happen before the other, and that's what I'm trying to get to. Is, if we took an extreme position and said we roll over and play dead, we don't care what you study, we're okay with it all, and trust me, I'm sure we're far from that. My point is, the letter is a milestone. It addresses the environmental impact statement. We've got to work on that. But our community, in advance of that letter, needs to know what the position of this council is. And we have not come out as a current council. I'm Jane. I support previous council statements. But I, for the sake of the health of the legislative process and public input, we have got to
and I guess
have this discussion.
all I'm urging you is, beyond the statement, which is our current statement, which is we oppose tolling on Mercer Island, beyond that statement, you don't have to get into a nuanced discussion or debate by February 22nd. You do have time. You're going to get a lot of pressure to say things sooner than later, but you're a deliberative body. You're the official body, and all I do is we urge you to not do things before you're ready. And make sure you have all the information you need to make a statement. You're already on record saying you oppose.
We're not. Well, we're not, and I think
Well,
that's the
the
point.
council
is. I think
The
that
city
is an
is.
important. That's an important debate for this group to have. Are we reiterating the position taken by previous councils? The community is clearly waiting to hear from us in that sense.
So I'm going
Mike?
to just hop in here too, because I'm starting to get alarmed that we're going way down the road of having discussion about tolling an I-90, and rather than say, we hear that it needs to be scheduled, and maybe that's a piece that staff can come back and bring some suggested times, and we can go further into it there. But I'm starting to hear what sounds like
Discussion and debate.
discussion and debate.
I think I do.
So with Katie's caution in mind, Mike and then Mike.
Yeah, I was not going to get into that detail, but I was going to elaborate a little bit more on what Dan said, because I work a lot with scoping EISs and things. We can make a statement, whatever that is, but I think getting to Dan and Rich's comments, what WashDOT and Federal Highways are going to look for are going to be, okay, what other areas should they be exploring that they have not already? So if your hypothesis is that tolling is not going to occur, or somehow Mercer Islanders are going to be exempt from tolling, then what we need to think about and point them toward is, okay, if that's not going to happen, then how do they recoup the revenue? How do they do all these various other things? And what ideas do we have as a body, with our staff and public input? Where can we point them in another direction that would still meet their needs? And there are a lot of ideas around doing that.
So I agree with that. That's what we need to do, the scoping. We also need to do what you talked about, Councilmember Berlin, have a policy at with the council. There's also a very important third element. WashDOT only does what the legislature tells them to do. I think we will also need meeting or time in which to help coalesce the community to pressure our legislators and also legislators with a common interest in preserving without tolls on I-90 and moving R8A over to the right. So there's three elements. It's a legislature issue.
I think we're probably going to talk about this on the 4th. What do you think?
For a long time.
I have some scheduling things, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
so it's on the calendar for the 4th, and we will try and figure out how to put that together. It's probably on the calendar for the 25th, but let's figure that out after the 4th, okay? Or we're at the 4th. Mike, you've got other things?
Yeah, so, Rich, obviously you'll have to schedule the executive search on there, how we talk about that. That's kind of new territory, but I'm sure that we'll need time
for
your replacement.
But
I'm sure we'll need time in the agenda.
You should talk to the mayor about that. That's not my job.
Well,
no, it's scheduled.
To the extent
It's
that you
scheduled.
something scheduled.
Scheduling.
Yeah, we'll talk about
it. The mayor will help me with that.
Yes.
And the other thing, remember Mr. Lewis from yesterday signed on to coming back here in the spring, so we'll also want to make time for that.
That's correct.
Anything else for the planning calendar? Okay, board appointments, we have none. Council member reports. Mike, go first.
Is this other business?
We are at council member reports.
Okay, you don't have, what's that? Other business. Okay, other business. I'd like to talk about the publicity notification plan for both the January 29th meeting and the February 2nd meeting. Will there be, will our community, what's the plan for both, for the word getting out for both those meetings?
Well, January 29, I know I've seen signs up in businesses.
That is a WashDOT meeting, and they are publicizing it like crazy, and I think we probably have it on our website as well.
We have a news item.
They are the driver of that. They have a public relations, public information office that's pushing that hard. They'll get the word out, and we will be right behind them copying that onto the web.
Our police chief has a...
Apparently that's getting passed out as well.
Well, I'd suggest that we publicize that like it's a very important meeting, one of our meetings.
Well, I think we have.
It's on our website as a news item. It's on our website as a calendar item. It's going to be in the MI Weekly. It's pretty much kind of...
Are we going to put it in the Reporter and the Mercerdale Park sign and that type of stuff?
Considering that it's not our meeting, we do not legally have to
It will be on the Mercerdale sign. I talked with Bruce about that.
And how about an ad in the Reporter and the patch and all that other stuff?
Well, if it's an ad, WashDOT's going to pay for it, yeah.
I don't mind paying for it. Let's just get it's so important to our community. Let's get it out there.
We'll find out what their communication plan and see if they've hit all the spots.
Okay.
But it is really their responsibility to hit all the spots.
I fully recognize that, but I think we need to embrace it as if it's ours, and we want to get the full word out to our citizens, and we don't, they're not, you know, in the same...
Mike, are you supporting communications efforts?
Yeah.
Ouch!
Just call Mary up and say, we don't need another person to, I won't go there. And also, the February 2nd meeting is, now the February 2nd meeting is our meeting, and there's a wealth of institutional knowledge for us to share with our community. Are we also going to publicize that meeting with same vigor?
My intent is no on that one. It really is a meeting about us getting up to speed on what some wise folks have to tell us. There is no intention of having a public comment at that meeting or turning that into, and in fact, I think it works against the intent of getting wise advice if you turn that into a big show, because it'll hinder those folks, I think, from being thoughtful about their comments to us.
Well, you know, it's also an opportunity, I mean, we say us the community, to find out from their knowledge and their understanding of the history of where we are, why we are where we are. So, you know, the more advertising that you can put out about that February 2nd, the more knowledgeable the public gets on why we might reach a conclusion that we might reach. Bruce will be under the same. We'll be on the same. When I say we, us here and out on the island will all be on the same sheet of music on why we're looking at things the way we're looking at things. That's why I think publicizing it is important to get the word out there.
I'd be happy to have other thoughts on that. I've stated where I think we are, and Mike stated where he thinks we are. Jane?
I guess my first thought was, well, sure, why shouldn't the public come? I mean, I'm a news person. I really think that it's important to get the word out. But I guess I would make sure that people understand that this will not be a meeting where they can really give a lot of input, because we need to talk to those former mayors and really get information from them. So I would not like it to be billed as a public forum or anything like that, because it's so important for us to get them in a room and hear that history and hear their thoughts and about the process and their ideas on what we should do.
Where are you having it, Rich? Which room?
Community center?
Are you going to get a small room or a big room?
Well, it's getting bigger by the second.
Well, we have one of the regular meeting rooms. I don't know the availability of the Mercer room, so
I think that we have no choice but to publicize it. We don't want anyone suggesting that we're trying to do things behind closed doors.
Right.
And
it was always intended to be a public.
But it's we publicize it through the Reporter, like any public meeting. We put it on MI Weekly. We send it out to your email list if that's how you publicize meetings. We do what we can to make sure the public is aware of it. Obviously, we're talking about it here now, and so to that extent, we're informing the public of it. But I completely agree with Jane. We don't want to create expectations that it's going to be like the January 29th meeting, where it's specifically for the purpose of soliciting public input. It's more to enable the public to hear exactly what we're hearing, so there's no ambiguity as to what we heard and what the discussion was back and forth. So I think that's fine, and I think you do need to look into the larger room there and see if you can get it, and make sure that we have the opportunity to include as many people as possible. And we also need to make sure that we have the ability to keep order in the room. And I'm sure that the chief will make sure that's possible.
Anyone else? I think Dan's probably got a pretty good wrap on that. So, okay. Anything else? So we're in the midst of council member reports. Tony, you're up.
Nothing. I was just going to ask about the Verizon lot. I don't know if you wanted to speak to that, or the Verizon project.
They begin clear cutting soon.
No, you want do a roundup on that?
Yes, Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager. And I sent an email out to council today that you may have seen. As you know, Verizon is under a lease with the city, installing a new cell tower in Island Crest Park. That work has been underway for a little while. Our understanding in communicating with them at the end of last week is that they will have their pole installed and most of the pit that they've dug filled in within the next week to 10 days, and then they'll start site restoration, which should be done by the middle of February. Under their agreement with the city, they've posted a bond to ensure that they do that work in a way that's satisfactory to us, that they replace vegetation, that any trees that are damaged are replaced. And so park staff is monitoring that work on a daily basis and will continue to do so.
Thanks, Noel. Thank you. Anything else? Dan? Jane?
Yeah, an update on the Arts Council. They had their meeting January 9th. They'll be working with the Parks Department on hopefully coming up with an idea for, in conjunction with the work that's going to be done at the playground there. They'll be coming up with an idea for a mural to go on behind the tennis courts. That needs to be redone anyway, and the idea is to the Arts Council and Parks and Rec will work together on getting some work there, some art there. There are openings on the Arts Council that I would really like to have filled, so if anyone's interested in contributing to the community by being on the Arts Council, I urge you to apply. And that's it.
Is there on the fire station, is there 1% for the arts?
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to make sure the Arts Council starts engaging in that project to see what they want to do on that.
We have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that would be a perfect thing for them to start thinking about.
Will do.
Debbie?
The only comment I would make is to call attention to the public sessions or public discussions on Luther Burbank playground, play area redesign. I don't have the dates right in front of me. I believe they're early February. 2 chances to come, talk, meet, and make sure that it's a great vision for that next 50 years, if the previous 50 years were any indication. But that's. Oh, I actually had a question for Jane. Has the trust met Open Space Conservancy?
Yes. Unfortunately, I missed that meeting on Thursday.
Okay, because I believe they were going to be taking up the concern about off-leash in Pioneer Park. And that is a topic that I'd like to get an update on from the Conservancy. I think they were the first line of review or discussion.
Yes.
The Luther Burbank is the 5th and the 19th.
The 5th and the 19th of February.
6
It's
o'clock.
CCMV.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mike?
I just want to thank members of the community for having Peak on the island. It is such a great facility, and I consider that because the reason I came late is we've had to play, I coached 2 teams, 4th grade girls and 6th grade boys. We've had to play over at the Bellevue Boys and Girls Club, the main facility, and it is reminiscent of when I was in elementary school playing at the CYO, where you had virtually no space and no sound deafening materials. And my ears are still ringing because it was so loud. So we are very fortunate to live where we do. Thank you.
All right. Okay, with that, I'm sure it were time for a break because we're way past the time we've normally tried to take a break. So let's take 10 minutes now, and then we'll come back and launch into executive session. So go ahead, back at 9. Now that we've got not 24-hour time, but 12-hour time, I can say 9:31. And Dan, if you want to come up and chat with us, come on up.
cue video. Hang on just a second.
All right, we're back from our break. We have 2 executive sessions scheduled this evening. We are going to go into the first. We'll come back out and then go into the second. The first is to discuss negotiations and proceedings related to collective bargaining agreements pursuant to RCW 42.30.140, paren 4, paren B, for approximately 15 minutes. We'll come back out if we need more time than that. So with that, we are off to executive session.